Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it normally goes for about 3 hours. So if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. How is everybody doing this week? Speculator is here. Life is a journey. Welcome, welcome. With each week that passes, it's just amazing how quickly the world is changing um, with the coronavirus and all of the ripple effects from it. How are you guys doing with all of that? Are there new concerns this week than there were last week, or is it about the same? How is your anxiety doing? Are you struggling with any depression? Um, how have you been doing with your self-care and checking in with yourself? Yeah, speculator says, doing well, seems odd having the world isolating along with me. Yes, it's really wild to see footage from people flying drones around normally really busy areas. Somebody was flying a drone in where is it, Rome, at the Trevi Fountain, which is a really famous you know tourist spot and local spot, but then there's just nobody there. So it's eerie to see all of the cities just kind of like a ghost town. So Tom says, hi, I've been having a hard week with stress and PTSD from my son's narcissistic mom. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I can imagine. And Rick says, God help the ones that are in quarantine with abuse. Yes, it's really concerning when you think about that and uh, who people are being stuck in quarantine with. And there's probably a lot of child abuse that's going on at this time, and a lot of, you know, um, what's known as intimate partner violence. But just being in a house, being in an environment with an abusive person, regardless of the dynamic, is really awful. I have come across, this is becoming more and more frequent. Angie and I got some questions on this yesterday in the live stream, and we've gotten a few in here over the past couple weeks, but different abusive people making threats. Oh, I'm going to spit in your food. Or just flat out coughing on people, or, you're making a big deal out of this. And it's sort of this level of, um, you know, uh, I don't know what you would even call it, denial fueled invincibility, where they just think that they won't get the coronavirus, or if they do, that they would be okay, that they would have no consequences from it, and that everybody else is making a big deal out of it. And irrational invincibility, that was the term I was looking for. And it's interesting because, of course, laws are now kind of keeping up with this kind of thing. People are getting charged with are looking at major fines, potentially felony offenses for uh, you know for for basically assaulting other people. you know you making threats like that, it's considered a death threat, and um, putting other people in harm's way. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how, like, what happens with that as far as like an abuse in an abuse environment, if that's also going to be considered abuse, and if so, to what extent, and can kids be removed from a home for that. uh, just new territory for lots of agencies out there. Oh, Martha. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. She says, I had to put my cat to sleep. He had kidney disease, so it's been a rough week. But I'm doing okay because I'm back in therapy and talking with my old friend. I hope you're doing okay. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your cat. Just that's just heartbreaking. It's the pretty much the only downside to having a pet, isn't it? Is that they just don't live as long as we do. And it's so hard um, to watch any person or animal that you love go downhill like that. So uh, I'm so sorry for your loss. Katie says, I'm new to the chat, relatively new to the channel. Well, welcome, Katie. We're glad to have you here. And Life as a Journey says divorce rates are also increasing during this time. Yes, yes, I'm sure that they are. And there's gonna, and it's the stress is, I think, gonna just kind of continue for a while. And that's just something that I think we all need to just prepare for. And it goes back to what we've been talking about almost every week now since this started, about focusing on what do we have control over and what do we not have control over, and doing the best we can to kind of double down on what we do have control over, and to focus on that, and then focus on letting go of what we don't have control over. So, in terms of what we do have control over, um, kind of watching our spending, um, paying attention to our self-care, checking in with ourselves, figuring out what do we need today or what do we need in this moment. Um, just, my goodness, trying to plan ahead as we as much as we possibly can, financially, physically, health wise. um, there's been so many places out there that have made adjustments for the virus. It's been really interesting. um, with that, there's pharmacies, at least the local pharmacy here, probably a lot of them across the US, are going to mail delivery is an option. They're no longer having you sign your credit cards. You can order some prescriptions for longer than 90 days. Um, it really just depends. So figuring out, okay, well, what options do you have? These kinds of things. Um, let's see here. Angela says, hi, Dana. How are you coping with this whole COVID virus thing? Um, I try to, like, I think with like everybody else, I've been trying to take it a day at a time. Um, I have been, I was really struggling with feeling panicky over the past, I guess it was more so last week. And then I realized a lot of that had to do with how much news I was consuming. And so I really had to cut back on that. And I had to convince myself that I wasn't putting myself in harm's way by doing so. Because, anxiety and that panicky feeling is not often rational. So I really kind of had to talk myself down and be like, okay, Dana, you know what you need to do. And continuing to have a feed of this, in your brain throughout the day is not helping. It's just making things worse. So one of the best things that I did for myself was to cut back on the amount of news I was consuming. So yeah, so I've been struggling with anxiety and feeling really panicky. I am very fortunate in that I'm an introvert, and so being stuck at home is no big thing for me at all. Um, I don't have children, so that's another. Um, in times like this, it's uh, I'm glad that I don't have that added challenge of the worry and trying to juggle that piece of it. There's so many. That's just a huge amount of stress that I'm sure that a lot of parents are under. So um, Yeah, I guess my concern right now is, when are they going to be able to kind of get this under control, and what is the state of the world going to be in when that happens? And then trying to just make peace with the fact of, we don't know. And all any of us can do right now is to, try to be extra good to ourselves, try to keep our sanity, try to, triple up on our self-care, and invest this time, I guess I should say, not just waste it or spend it, but truly invest it into kind of worthwhile pursuits. And, you know, which often includes, connecting or reconnecting with the quality people in your life, and cultivating hobbies, and just um, enjoying everything that is kind of good and right in our lives. Okay, let's see. Um, Slavic Princess, hello. And I still owe you an email. I am so sorry. I promise. Um, let's see. This is a multiple part question here. She says, hello, Dana. I really hope you've been doing well. I kindly have a question. Does the lack of warm empathy that a true narcissist has disable them from developing any? Even though they thought they had feelings and even if they really thought they had feelings and really want to change. When I started to break free from codependence, I found it daunting, even though I succeeded a few years later. So even though I'm perfectly okay with firm boundaries and can accept red flags when I see them, I do value your opinion. Oh, that's a big question. And I hate to speak in absolutes, right? Because every single person is different. Uh, so I don't like blanket answers like that. And then I also am not a big fan of blanket answers, because then people get hung up on, well, then they really need to know, well, if this person are they really a true narcissist, or do they just have a bunch of narcissistic behaviors? And that to me is the wrong um, focus. So I would look at, again, I would look at behavior. So if you're talking about a person who lacks warm empathy, right? They lack the ability to have emotions. They understand emotions, right? Because oftentimes narcissists prey upon them. So it's not like they don't understand emotions. It just doesn't really sincerely resonate with them. So for a person who lacks that ability to kind of understand and sympathize with another person's pain, can they develop empathy down the road? Potentially. I think they'd have to, I mean, probably not though. They'd have to really want to. Um, this is something that's learned at a fairly young age, and there have been studies done with young children. This is why this kind of behavior, it's so tragic when you see kids that have a lack of empathy early on, and if there's not effective interventions that are done early on, that kind of behavior doesn't get corrected. So it's not just um, a lack of empathy. You're talking about a person having their kind of fight or flight mechanism going off, and so those defenses are up. So there's just not this level uh, of connection to other people. I read a great, somebody put this in such a great way the other day. I was reading something and it said something along the lines of, with regards to children, if a child doesn't get um, kind of the care and nurturing and support they need at something like, at first they protest and then they become complacent and then they become defiant. I think that's how they said it. And I thought that was really pretty spot on. Or actually, maybe it was they become they protest, and then they become defiant, and then they become complacent. Something along those lines. But regardless, this is something that tends to just happen. It's not a conscious process. It's a part of a person's personality that goes into protection mode. Where it's sort of like, well, I'm not going to get close to other people because they always hurt me. And the impact of that is that reduced level of empathy. So it's so much more involved than, um, trying to just teach empathy, because there's that saying that, neurons that fire together wire together. So if a person's an adult and they're struggling, they just don't see how their behavior harms other people. It's going to be very difficult to try to go and explain to them behavior by behavior why that's inappropriate or why that's hurtful. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I don't think it would be appropriate to try to take that on in like an interpersonal relationship. It just wouldn't work. I don't think it would work in an interpersonal relationship, because it's what's going to happen, because nobody wants to be on the receiving end of that, right? Like that would be obnoxious to have another person continually pointing out uh, things about you that they didn't like, or issues with your behavior. Nobody would respond well to that. Um, in an interpersonal relationship, they're going to do better having it either be somebody that they have a connection with, that they trust, but not a close connection with, that the interpersonal dynamics would get all tangled up in that. Plus, then it just creates this imbalance, where basically you're that person's therapist and they're the client. It's just not conducive. So, is it possible? Potentially. There's so many uh, mm, there's so many other variables at play. I wouldn't I wouldn't stay with a person. I wouldn't be in a relationship with a person holding on to that hope that uh, that they could eventually come around. Um, but that, because it could take decades, if it even happens. And again, because there's that imbalance present, and I'm not even saying that this is your question, right? So like, just I'm just thinking kind of broad brush here. But if a person were to stay with another person, they're like, okay, I really care about them. I love them. I really want to help them get better. They say that they want to change, that they want to develop empathy, that they care, that they're admitting they're a narcissist, this, that, and the other. And let's just say in 10 years, with all kinds of work, and they don't get burned out, they don't get frustrated or better at hiding their behavior or whatever they're up to, and they really do work on it, then if we're staying in a dynamic like that, we're trying to help them, then that's also some unresolved codependence on our end, really. So, and then what'll happen is once they do get fixed, quote unquote fixed, then we're going to have the feeling of, oh gosh, well, they don't need me now. And I need to feel needed, so I need to go elsewhere. And that dynamic will just kind of crumble away, because that was the glue that was holding it together. So they'll either get healthy enough that they're like, wow, this is really toxic. This is really imbalanced. This person's not my significant other or my parent or my sibling or whatever. I'm treating them like my therapist. This is way imbalanced, and this is unhealthy for me. And they'll back away, or we'll realize, oh my gosh, they don't need us anymore. Or, this is too draining for me and I have to go. That's why that would be challenging. As far as somebody, I think if a person, let's say, because it's very common, right? As people go through this whole process of kind of personal growth, and we're examining behavior. And of course, we're all seeing like, oh gosh, yikes, I kind of do some of this stuff too. Or, oh boy, I hope that wasn't my intention. I hope I'm not coming across like that. Or we're kind of examining our own behavior, possibly for the first time. And it's really common for a lot of people to fear that they might be a narcissist, or that they might have some really problematic behavior that they need to work on. And, so I don't want to discourage anybody that's listening to this and they're thinking that. I think if you have a sincere desire to change your behavior, the key word being sincere, if you have a sincere desire to change any of your behavior, then I do believe that it can be done. But only, only each individual knows that. And the problem with manipulative people is that they, you know, kind of say anything, and they'll say anything to kind of get out of trouble. So it's hard to really tell how sincere they are. Does that answer your question? I feel like that was kind of a long, a long answer. I don't know. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Oh, nope. Just kidding. Scrolling down. Yeah, Slavic Princess says, yes, as very much as an empath as I am, and as often as I engage in very heavy shadow work, I stand by my boundaries, whether I want to or not, and don't actually relapse that much. We need to have this conversation. I really hope that we can set a time to talk, because yes, it would require a lot of boundaries on behalf of the other person, and a certain level of detachment that would have to go along with that, where it can't be like I'm trying to fix another person. It would, I mean, this, again, we're talking like really, really unique dynamic where they're not, that behavior is on the more mild end of the spectrum kind of a thing. Or if it's a client that you're working with, like this kind of a thing where we're able to detach from the outcome, and them getting fixed isn't about us. Like we don't have our own ego tangled up in that. It's sort of like, I'm here to hold space, and I'm here to kind of walk with you along this process, but I don't have any vested income, I guess, any invested energy in the outcome. So it's, I think that's kind of a good boundary, or a way to kind of double check ourselves. Like, what is my agenda with all of this? And if it's coming from a good place where there is that level of detachment, uh, and it's not draining to us, then that's okay. Somebody said something the other, I need to write all these things down. I come across some people say they word things in such a wonderful way. Somebody had said the other day, and again, I don't remember what video I was watching. It was some very random video. And this guy had made a comment about compassion, the term compassion fatigue, which you guys have probably heard about. It's a term where, people that are in kind of caregiving fields, therapists, nurses, teachers, social workers, you have it, tend to, you get burned out, and you get burned out because you're caring nonstop about other people. And so then it just kind of, you get burned out, and you can become very kind of bitter and jaded and cynical um, and all of that. And the guy made a really great point about it. He said, if a person's experiencing compassion fatigue, then what they're doing isn't compassionate. And I love that. I thought that was so appropriate, because it's true, like true compassion isn't fatiguing. If we're doing it in a balance, then we're also being compassionate to ourselves. And there's no energy that's being drained. So I guess it's that kind of mentality with working with somebody else, if they're wanting to go down that path of exploring their behavior and all of that. It's not getting overly emotionally invested in it, in the outcome. Just being there and not letting it affect you. Holding those boundaries. Let's see. Let's scroll up here. Nadia says, my ex of 10 years and 3 children has been horrible since I made him leave. He quickly moved in with the woman he was cheating on me with, and since then, daily gives me gross play-by-plays. Why? It's to hurt you. His ego was hurt. You had him leave, and it's immature, right? Because that would be the natural consequence to cheating. But in his mind, it's how dare you do this to me? I cheated because you somehow drove me to it, or you were wrong. It's just denial, deflection is what they do. You should have never looked at my phone to find out that I was cheating. So you finding out is really your fault, and you're the one. Or I can't believe you gave up on this relationship so easily. When it's like, you've been cheating. Like what? So there's no accountability. It's easier for people, I think, to get angry at the other person than it is for them to be angry at themselves. And that's kind of what you're seeing. So him lashing out is you really hurt me by having me move out. And so I'm going to hurt you back. I'm going to tell you about how wonderful this new woman is. I'm going to try to make you jealous. And of course, he's probably telling her a very warped view of reality and turning you into the bad guy. So if you haven't already experienced that with her, where she's feeding into it and hanging all over him and trying to kind of rub it in your face as well, I would try to prepare yourself emotionally for that. So, but remember, what she's hearing from him is a very skewed side of things. It's not going to be what really happened. But yeah, that kind of behavior, I'll show you, I'm going to punish you, that's really common. Chrissy asks, is the silent treatment considered abuse? It hurts really bad. Yes, it is. It's ironically, it's considered a form of verbal abuse, even though that's the problem. There's nothing's being verbalized, but it's considered abusive because it's the purpose of the silent treatment. It's designed to groom the other person. It's a grooming behavior. So it's manipulative, and it's the purpose of it is, if you do this, then there's going to be hell to pay, right? So, and of course, the silent treatment, and I get this question all the time, so this is why I'm going to go down this road a little bit here. People ask all the time, well, isn't no contact the same as the silent treatment? And it's not. And the reason being, no contact is something that you do for self-protection. It's not to punish the other person. And it's not playing games. It's not, well, I'm going to protect myself and then I'll reopen contact, and then you do something I don't like, and then I'm going to protect myself and then I'm going to reopen contact. It's not that back and forth thing. No contact is, I can't have this in my life and I have to shut the door, kind of a thing. And it's for your safety, your sanity. Whereas a silent treatment is, I have every intention of keeping this relationship going, but I'm going to punish you. So I'm not going to talk to you until I feel that you've had enough. And yeah, it is incredibly damaging. It's terrible. It feels like you're twisting in the wind, holding your breath, waiting for, wondering the whole time, am I ever going to hear from them again? Are they okay? I can't, what, and then you're rehashing, what did I do that was so wrong? And boy, I don't feel like that was, what I did was that bad. Or, and then it just gets to the point where it can be so torturous that it's like, I'll just do anything to get you to just talk to me again, because it's so uncomfortable. And unfortunately, silent treatment is, a lot of people use it. And a lot of people, I think, use it because assertive communication isn't taught. So it's not taught with the degree and frequency that it really needs to be. And so people don't know how to be assertive. And so they resort to other forms of communication, like being passive aggressive, uh, passive, or aggressive. So those are the other three types: passive aggressive, passive, or aggressive. And that any of those three they don't work in the long run. It creates an imbalance in every relationship, every time, every single time that kind of behavior is used. So that's one of those things. The silent treatment is, a lot of times survivors of abuse will say, oh my gosh, I do silent treatment. And uh, that tends to be like the one thing that they can do in a relationship, is like, and it's not a punishing, sometimes it's a punishing behavior in terms of survivors, but I think more often than not, it's, I'm just going to stay quiet because everything I'm saying right now is wrong according to you, and I feels like you're looking for a fight, and so I'm just going to stop talking. So it's not really silent treatment, it's more of, I see that you're wanting to argue in the mud with me over every little single thing I say, and I don't want to play this game. So I don't want to argue, and I'm just not going to talk. We're done. Yeah. Let's see here. Hi, Jack. It makes the comments. I personally like Ross Rosenberg calling codependence self-love deficit. Or maybe he was saying that self-love deficit is the newer term to avoid the stigma codependence has. My understanding is the self-love deficit is a term that he came up with, and it's to kind of more accurately define codependence. I also, people, there's always going to be pros and cons and concerns with everything out there. There's concerns with that, Ross's term, self-love deficit. There's people out there that don't like it, that feel really offended by it. There's people out there that really warmly embrace it. I can see why, but I also see where he's coming from, and I agree that it's absolutely necessary to separate. I think his term is a lot more descriptive in terms of a lot of codependent behaviors than just the word codependency. Codependency is one of those terms. It's so weird. It's such a profound, like, game-changing concept, but I feel like it just got lost in the cracks over the past couple decades. And it's often confused with dependence, which it's not. And it's confused with, it does tend to go hand in hand with, another person that has an addiction, but like the partner of a person struggling with addiction, but not always. So a lot of people think of codependence in terms of, oh, well, but I'm not married to an alcoholic, or I can't be codependent because I am an alcoholic. So there's a lot of confusion with codependence and kind of what it is and what kind of behaviors are involved in it. And the self-love deficit, I think, is a great way to kind of examine those behaviors. But of course, the issue that I think people tend to have with that is they feel like, well, no, I didn't get in this abusive relationship because of a self-love deficit. I got into it because this person was highly manipulative and got their hooks in me. And then, next thing you know, I didn't realize it was abuse. I didn't realize or if I did realize it was abuse, it was too difficult for me to leave. I had kids, we were married, we had combined accounts, I was afraid for my life, these kinds of things. So I can see where they're coming from. It's just a big topic, and I'm not saying that they're wrong or right. This kind of learning, actually, let me back up. Learning what it really means to love ourselves is not taught, and it's really not role modeled effectively. So I think this is one of the reasons people get so offended by that, because I think most of us tend to kind of go around being like, yeah, I guess, sure, I love myself, whatever. I don't hate myself. I don't want to die. I don't uh, spend hours every day in front of the mirror, berating myself. I I guess I love myself. I mean, sure, there's things I'd like to lose some weight. I don't know. There's other things I'd like to change about myself, but I mean, I guess I love myself as much as anybody does. But that's not what self-love is. It's the ability to value ourselves and to realize that we're worth protecting and worthy of being treated with dignity and respect by ourselves and by other people. And what that looks like played out. Like that's really um, a more fleshed out definition of self-love. And so most people, even people that get defensive about the concept of a self-love deficit in terms of abuse, when they start hearing about it in those kind of terms, they're like, oh gosh, well, maybe there is something to this. And personally, I find that that's a better way to kind of approach the topic, because it's not, obviously, if a person's been abused, it's not their fault. It's the abuser's fault for having abusive behavior. The self-love part is, this is not something that's taught. I don't care how loving of a home a person grows up in. This is a lot of these, how to value ourselves is, it's just not taught or role modeled to the extent that it largely needs to be, because anybody can get hooked into an abusive relationship. But I'll tell you, it's just been my experience that the more they learn about uh, knowing when they're being treated, the more that they learn about how it feels when they value themselves. And I'm not talking about pampering yourself. I'm not talking about, oh, I value myself, I have to drive a Mercedes, right? Or I value myself, I have to get a manicure every week. No, I'm talking about um, valuing yourself in terms of what are you doing with your energy, your time, even your money, your body, all of these, all aspects of us. What are you doing with that? Are you wasting it? Are you spending it, or are you investing it? Because when we treat ourselves with value, we're investing our time, our energy, our money or resources, all of this into something that grows. Like that's what nourishing behavior is. So we're nourishing ourselves. We're investing our time and nourishing quality. It's just quality people and quality conversations and quality experiences. And again, this has nothing to do with money. Quality experiences can be, um, uh, you know, sitting around a campfire or calling an old friend and just catching up. But it's the investing. That's the part of it that's key. Treating ourselves with value. So, yeah, it's uncomfortable conversation to start, because people can feel so defensive and they're confused after abuse. They don't know what happened. They're emotionally raw, and it's a delicate conversation to have. It often, I think, takes time. It's a conversation down the road in healing. I think a lot of these uncomfortable conversations are bringing certain aspects of ourselves to awareness that we can work on. Like I was mentioning in response to Slavic Princess before, whenever any of us are confronted about something that's potentially hurtful, we're going to feel defensive. And when defensiveness is present, connection is not. And so we stop listening, we start formulating our attack. How am I going to respond to this? How am I going to argue my point? How am I going to kind of dig my feet in even further? And that's part of the problem. So this is why having, this is what in part makes this such a delicate conversation to have, because it's hearing this information from a person in a way that doesn't feel attacking. And it's just been my experience working at, you know, at a domestic violence shelter, doing the same kind of work one-on-one and doing it online. I have found that it's more effective online. And in doing it online in a group is more effective. And people reading books on this topic, it's more effective. And I think the main reason for that is because they know it's not personal. You know, I don't there's there's that level of detachment that's present in an online format or through a book where we're not taking things so personally. So, and because of that, our defenses are able to be down and we're able to better absorb the information for what it is, instead of feeling like, oh, well, she's just jealous, or, um, you know, I don't know, whatever. Like people's defenses go, it happens to all of us. And it's more of an unconscious thing than anything else. Uh, Good for you, CFIN. Says, Hi, Dana. I haven't logged on in a while. Lately, I'm thinking about being more protective and asserting myself in work dynamics. I work in an ultrasound lab, and this epidemic is so dangerous for us. Yes, I agree completely. And good for you for thinking about asserting yourself. This is absolutely the time to be doing that. And as a former nurse, it makes me livid, angry to almost the point of tears when I hear about, uh, especially people in various medical fields being reprimanded for wearing a mask or whatever. And I would say, I would encourage you to, I don't know if they would consider firing you or laying you off. If they fire you, then I would definitely file for unemployment, and I would also file a lawsuit for, um, uh, you know, unlawful termination, if that's a thing in your state. You might want to contact an attorney. A lot of attorneys have a free, consultation kind of a thing. I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits that come out of this because, the CDC and the WHO, the people that know best, are now coming forward and they're saying, yes, basically, in order to stop this thing, we all need to be wearing masks when we go outside, all of us, all the time. That's what it's going to take. And um, frankly, as a person, when I'm walking around and I see other people wearing a mask, it makes me feel better. It doesn't it doesn't somehow make me feel more reassured that they're not wearing a mask. Like, no, I want to see you in a mask. I want you to stay, because if you can act on your best behavior in front of me, then that gives me more confidence of what you're doing, like what I'm not around. Like if I were to go, I don't know, go to the drive-through and get food, um, humor me. Like I want to see you take wearing a mask and having gloves on and staying the distance and passing me. That gives me more reassurance that what I don't see behind in the kitchen is going to at least be sanitary, or has a chance of being as sanitary, because you at least know what to do and what not to do when people are looking. Like, it concerns me when people don't seem to know, and they'll walk right up to you or whatever, and then you just think, oh my, especially if they're handling food or they're in the medical field or whatever. It's sort of like, well, then my goodness, what you're doing when other people are not around has got to be 100 times worse, because you don't realize what you're doing that's dangerous. So yeah, I would get your ducks in a row. I would contact an attorney, and I would just make it very clear, if you can, I mean, realizing that you're going to be potentially rocking the boat, but if you can afford to financially rock it, then I absolutely feel like this is 100% an important stand to take, and to let them know, yeah, I need to be wearing a mask. because I value my patients, I value myself. And and I would just let management know, here's the deal. What side of history do you want to be on? When all of this is under control, how many lawsuits do you guys want to have? The CDC, the HWO, people in the know are saying this is what we need to be doing. So I'm sorry that your policy doesn't allow for this, but I can't support that. I can't. We are in a medical profession. It is our responsibility. Most of us took an oath, and our license is on the line. So we can't we aren't held to your standards, dear manager. We're held to the standards of our board of ethics that we vowed to follow. Or even just simply, if you're in a profession that doesn't have a license, be like, you know what, this is just the right thing to do. And I'm not going to be a part of history saying, oh, well, management said for us to not do that. No, if they really have an issue, they can fire you. And then cross that. I mean, this is, like I said, it's easy. It's easier for me to talk when I don't have any skin in the game. So you need to really make sure that you're comfortable with rocking the boat before you start rocking it. But yeah, I think that's a good line to walk. And just because something might be the company rule or even the law in certain circumstances doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. It's really important that, like slavery was legal. Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's right. So we need to have our own moral code that exists outside of other people and rules and laws. And if we're coming from a place of, like I matter and you matter, like the people here involved matter, and it's the treating each other with dignity and respect. Like if that's the kind of the foundation for your moral code, then that's the side I would err on with that. Not some weird management rule. That just makes me so angry. Ugh. Let's see, let me scroll up here. Oh boy, that's a big comment to make, Huffle Mom. And that's something I'm going to have to kind of think about and potentially get back to you on. She says, Dana, I'm feeling a bit frustrated. Jack, who's also on this chat, is sure, and they're married, is sure he is basically a piece of garbage floating in an ocean of perfection, and there doesn't seem to be anything I can do to help him. And I guess my response to that would be, is this a new feeling for him? And this kind of or is it more pronounced now than it has been in the past? Kind of what's kicked this off? I guess kind of what is his take on it? And what do you think about this? Do you think that it's anxiety induced, or do you think it's kind of unresolved stuff, kind of stemming from low self-esteem and, kind of what is y'all's take on this? Because I mean, I can understand your feelings of frustration. I think most of us here, feel like we know Jack. And of course, we all realize that this ocean of perfection it's not an ocean of perfection. It's just a mirage. And that perfect is something that we're all a million miles away from. And that there's a lot of things that are right about Jack. So I would be curious to. Okay, Jack is saying, yeah, some of this is spurred with arguments and disagreements with our oldest child, and everything you said, the low self-esteem, the kind of unresolved issues uh, from childhood. I guess I would be curious, Jack, to what is the self-talk that you're doing during these times? So let's say your oldest child, you have an argument or a disagreement, they say something, they disagree with you, they think their way is better. Then what is going on? What kind of self-talk are you doing? Montana saying, I'm looking square in the eye at my perfectionism stuff. I think it may be why I feel so paralyzed about everything to the point of non-functioning. It's just programmed deep. Yeah. Fear of kind of the flip side of perfectionism, right? It's fear of making mistakes. And I think one of the reasons this fear can be so debilitating is because there's some legitimacy to it, right? So sort of like, well, gosh, if I mess up, this is going to cost me money or time, or uh, you know, there's consequences to making mistakes. That's the fear, right? Of we don't want to make mistakes because mistakes can be costly. But the reality is that mistakes is part of growing. And the most successful people out there are the ones that make the most mistakes. That's how they move forward in life. It's they quickly figure out what's working and what's not working, and then they do more of what's working, right? So, but I get it. It's hard to embrace that mentality and to deal with that self-talk of, oh God, I can't believe I messed up again, and what was I thinking, and I should have known better, and you're kind of armchair quarterbacking uh, every decision that you make. And so sometimes it can help to develop a different relationship um, with the process of trying, I guess, of putting yourself out there and realizing, coming at it from more of like a neutral, like a scientific almost standpoint, that place of neutrality. Like there's no judgment. You're standing there in a lab coat with a clipboard kind of a thing. And it's okay, how did this turn out? What kind of results was I after? What was the final result? Like there is no judgment, it's just curiosity. And then being like, okay, this is the result I got. Now what? Now what do we do? Is it back to the drawing board, or um, you know, where do we go from here? Because sometimes some of the biggest mistakes that we can make can lead to some of the best results in the short term or in the long term. So it's not so much, I guess, the outcome that happens, it's what you make of it. Let's see. And Huffle Mom says, I'm unable to speak for Jack, but all I know is that I tell him I love him along with everything I do every day to show him I love him. He just doesn't believe me. Yeah, and that can be really difficult if a person internalizes every mistake they make as a personal failure, right? It's this deeply flawed aspect of themselves as a human being. When it's not. It's okay, this didn't work out the way you wanted it to. Or maybe yeah, gosh, this was a mistake, or man, I really dropped the ball on that. But realizing that we all do that, and it doesn't make your lovability has nothing to do with that. Especially since it sounds like you're so incredibly well-intended. So, Huffle Mom, seems like a very down-to-earth, grounded, reasonable person, um, who has a really healthy understanding of what love is. And she's not just saying those words to be flippant, or to kind of blow sunshine at you. It sounds like she's saying it and she's backing it up with actions because she means it. So years ago, I used to work with at-risk kids, and I would get this kind of similar pushback of, oh, I can't do this, or um, these feelings of learned helplessness, you know, uh, achievement or success, or, um, these things are available for other people, but not for me. And that kind of, it's heartbreaking, like that mentality, it can be so difficult to get through. One of the things that I would tell them um, was, well, do you think that I like wasting my time? Like, do you think that I have nothing better to do? Uh, if I thought you were a lost cause, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't, you know? So I don't throw my time away. And so sometimes kind of I think approaching it that way, just like what Helpful Mom is doing, like Jack, she knows what love is, and she knows how to show love. She knows how to give love. She knows how to receive love. And it's not something that you need to earn through having perfect behavior. And she's not doing it because she feels sorry for you or whatever. She loves you for valid reasons. And um, I would encourage you this next week to practice not fighting that with her. So if she tells you that she loves you, um, to just say thank you, or to say I love you too, instead of becoming defensive or um, wanting to push back on that. Just practice sitting with accepting that. And Huffle Mom, I would encourage you to tell him Jack, I'm going to encourage Huffle Mom to say it at least 3 times a day and to follow it up with a concrete example of things that you're doing right. Jack, I love you, and maybe some sort of specific compliment. But even if you didn't do, Jack, I love you, and boy, I really appreciate you making dinner tonight. Like you just cook such wonderful cereal, or what, I don't know, whatever you make for dinner. You really know how to make a bowl of cereal, or you really know how to make it spaghetti. I just really thank you so much for doing that. Whatever is a sincere compliment. But then saying, but I want you to know that I would love you even if you didn't make dinner. And just practice just sitting there. And he says, I can do better than cereal. That's good. Yeah, or whatever it might be. I guess the point is, I wanted to point out that it doesn't have to be this like monumental undertaking. I don't want you to get caught up in the largeness of the action. It's her catching you um, doing things that she appreciates, things that you do on a daily basis uh, that she appreciates, and letting you know that she loves you because of who you are, because there's so many things that are right about you, and that you're lovable. Okay. Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, Huffle Mom says, I love you and I'm grateful to you for buying all the things you bought so we could have taco salad, but I would love you even if all you bought was cereal. Yeah, I would. So Jack, the takeaway from that, your homework, if you choose to accept it, is um, to just let that sink in, and to notice if you're experiencing discomfort. and to just sit with that discomfort, but to try to let her words sink in. Yeah, Kenneth asks, he says, Dana, I just discovered Teal Swan. I see that some people say good things about her and some say bad things. What do you think? And I have very strong opinions about certain people um, in kind of this field, into the emotional health kind of area. I think there's a lot of um, concerning behavior there. However, with that said, I think it's what I might think is, um, you know, my 2 cents is worth my 2 cents, basically. So I would encourage you to hold on to whatever helps and to let the rest go. Uh, just be careful out there. And I'm not saying just with Teal, but with just people in general. There's a lot of people that um, have a lot of that are pathological liars and have very concerning behavior, and that aren't at all what they seem, that are into like the self-help kind of area. I think anybody that considers themselves a spiritual guru, frankly, that's a huge red flag. So just go slow with stuff like that, but hold on to what helps. Let the rest go. You know. Uh, Missouri Cowboy says, I'm so grateful for learning about boundaries. Yes. Yes, that's a game changer, isn't it? And that's another one of those things when people talk about it's one of those words. There's so many words in this whole healing process that everybody has their own working definition of it, and or I should say their own working understanding of it, and it and like we go wrong because we think we're speaking the same language, but we're really not. Or we think we have an accurate understanding of something, but really we don't. And boundaries is a big one. It flies under the radar for so many people, myself included, for the longest time. And y'all know I'm a big fan of Pia Melody. I think her work on the way she describes boundaries is so spot on, and just absolute brilliance. I really, yeah. Her books, what is the Intimacy Factor, and is it the Codependency Factor? There's like a series of books with kind of the same title. I think those two, she discusses boundaries in, and game changing, fantastic. She really talks about it. She carves it up in terms of boundaries as so much more than just saying no or just asserting ourselves. It's what we're putting out into the world and what we're allowing to come in from the world in every way, shape, or form. Like we have physical boundaries, we have sexual boundaries, we have financial boundaries, we have emotional boundaries, we have verbal boundaries, and boundaries function. I think she's the one that uses that example of boundaries function like a semi-permeable membrane of a cell that allows only certain things to pass in and out. And that's what makes it a functional boundary. So there's functional boundaries, or the flip side of that is a dysfunctional boundary. And so then there's also that word dysfunction that, again, we all tend to have our own working understanding or misunderstanding of that term. And so then that can also, using the term dysfunction, can feel really heavy and judgmental. Of, well, who are you to say that this is dysfunctional, or well, aren't we all kind of dysfunctional, so therefore nothing's dysfunctional, right? But looking at behavior or boundaries in terms of, are they working or are they not? Like there's no judgment here. It's just we're just looking at the kind of is something it's either working for you or it's not. This doesn't mean that another person, we have to make somebody else bad, or that we're bad, or there doesn't have to be this heaviness of judgment in there. It's just examining whether or not something's working. And if it's not, then what steps need to happen in order to get it to be working. So, but I really liked her explanation of boundaries are everything that we're putting out into the world and everything that we're allowing in. And what we're putting out in the world, and this is an ongoing process. It's a skill. Boundaries, learning how to have functional, appropriate boundaries, because I would say those two things are different. Ideally, they go hand in hand, but oftentimes they don't, especially when we're first learning the skill. It takes time and tons of practice for it to get to that place. And it's going to be easier with certain people than it is with other people. But that ability to have, so a boundary can be functional, but the way we might go about it, setting it, might not be appropriate. And this is where a lot of survivors, again, myself included, I think this is just kind of a natural step in the learning process. Is what tends to happen is people go from having either very weak or damaged boundaries or non-existent to they kind of hyper correct. And then they go to being very aggressive. So they go from being very passive to being very aggressive, not realizing that we don't need to go into fight mode in order to protect ourselves. Like, we can be assertive more often than not. Okay. So sometimes there is becoming aggressive is warranted, but I think few and far between. It's, it's extreme circumstances. But a lot of survivors, I hear this all the time, they're so proud. And I get it. It's just part of learning. It's getting your sea legs with it, where they're like, oh man, my sister asked me to babysit her kids again this weekend. And boy, I set her straight. I told her, la da 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 da, that she needs to quit going on dates with all these different men, and that I wasn't going to watch her kids, and what kind of mother is she, and da 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 da. Like, that's setting a boundary, but that's not tactful, and it's not assertive. That's aggressive. So finding how to moderate, to be appropriate in our interactions with others, and to be assertive in tactful ways. It's difficult. Being assertive is really difficult because we're being vulnerable. We're telling the truth. We are not used to telling the truth. It's weird. It's weird how society has gotten to this point where, especially, and it's different for different countries, but especially in the United States, we're so used to small talk and pleasantries and not saying what we really think or feel. And we don't even realize that this is a problem because we've all been doing it for so long. So it's really difficult, if you don't like, let's say the example of, oh, your sister wants you to watch your kids again and you're tired of it. Telling her the truth of, what, I adore your children. I love spending time with them, but I just don't have the energy to do it on the weekends. That's really my time to recharge. And now of course it's a different thing because of quarantine, but quarantine aside, I can't do this. It's exhausting. And, I don't mind watching them, every once in a while. I just can't do it every single weekend. That, being honest like that, it can feel very risky. It's so much easier to lie and just say, gosh, you know what? I can't watch the kids. I feel like I'm really coming down with something. Or, oh gosh, somebody just called me. There's an emergency, or I have to go into work. And it's all of these little white lies. And that's that avoidant passive behavior or passive aggressive behavior. Well, I'm just going to keep telling her that things keep coming up until she quits asking me, like that kind of stuff. And it takes a while for us to see with boundaries all of the different ways that we're doing this kind of stuff. and that we're being dishonest with ourselves, or that we're being dishonest with other people, and getting comfortable with just owning our truth and realizing that um, when we set a boundary and tell other people no, like, we can't be responsible for their reaction. Like, they're not going to like it. Nobody likes being told no. Nobody. So, but that's on them to be able to kind of self-soothe and to deal with it. That doesn't mean that we're not responsible for their feelings with regards to our delivery, right? Like, we still need to be tactful, but it doesn't mean, it means that if we're saying no in a tactful way and they get upset about it, then that's on them, not on us. And so that's part of that boundary of what we're allowing in. So when that part of the boundary is damaged, when we're allowing everything in, um, that's a problem, because then we're internalizing everything. So if somebody's saying things to us, oh, I don't know, you're some sort of version of stupid, fat, or ugly, right? And if we take that in, um, and we just take everything in as gospel truth, all of the hateful, hurtful things that other people are saying, whether it's intentional or not intentional, right? If we're allowing all of that in, we're not stopping it in that filter of, and kind of sorting it out. Like, it's okay, and that's understandable to, when somebody says something hateful or hurtful, to have your feelings hurt. That's completely understandable. Um, but we don't need to allow that to those we can put those comments in the bucket of hurt feelings. It doesn't have to spill over into the bucket of impacting our self-worth. So when we're getting our self-worth, our self-esteem from inside, that we know that we have value because we're here and we're alive, and that's, we just like, everybody has value, that's kind of a thing. We don't have to try to earn it. We don't have to fight for it. We impact change on this environment because we're here. We have this one life, kind of a thing. When we realize that we have value, when other people don't see our value, uh, or don't see our value in the same way that we do, that can be profoundly hurtful, right? That's okay, but we don't need to be like, well, I guess I'm going to agree with them. They think just this garbage person. Well, they must be right. So, and this kind of goes back to the result of this, because so many children that grow up in homes where they're being told, either being outright told, or these messages are implied of, you're stupid, bad, wrong, not worth, not worth it, kind of a thing. Um, Everything you do is wrong. There's that constant criticism. There's um, that lack of validation. These kinds of things. People tend to carry that with them because as children, we need, part of our survival is we need that validation from adults. So kids are like sponges. We're learning, the job of a parent is to basically program another human being, right? Like, they're programming their child. And as a child, we're just standing there like wide-eyed, absorbing all of it as gospel truth. And if it doesn't occur to a child, if a parent does something hateful or hurtful, that child doesn't see it as, boy, that is really hateful or hurtful. That child internalizes it and they think, what's so wrong with me? I must be hateful. I must be broken. I'll try to do better. And then but not realizing that that's the takeaway. So then they spend, the next couple decades trying to earn love and acceptance and being treated with dignity and respect, and continuing to get caught up with potentially getting caught up with hateful, hurtful people, because they never learned how to treat themselves with value, or to realize that they even had value. And so learning that boundary about what we allow in is a game changer. Now, the cool thing with this is that we don't need we can't go back and change our childhood. But the good thing is we don't need to. We just need to change how we perceive our childhood. So if you're carrying around all of these messages of I'm worthless, I should try harder, and God, there's so many things wrong with me, and blah blah, realizing that that's that wounded child inside of you that's talking. That's not the you that sees your value. That's not your true self. That's that wounded child. So while we can't change what happened to you, you can go back and change how you view what happened to you. So you can go back and be like, gosh, you know what? That was really some rotten things that mom or dad said to me. And that's on them. I'm not this broken, awful, you know, there's not all these things that are wrong with me. I was a kid. I did kid things. I made kid mistakes. Um, and it's on them that they treated me like that was somehow, so wrong or bad, kind of a thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like you see as adults, and it's easier to see this kind of behavior again with having that emotional distance. Let's say, for example, you see somebody bring in, I don't know, a 2-year-old to a late night movie, R-rated, violent, scary movie. And that kid is talking during the movie, screaming, maybe starts crying, maybe gets up and wants to run around. And the parents go bananas. I'm going to beat your butt, or I'm going to do this, or you need to sit down, and blah, blah, blah. And there's nothing wrong with the kid, right? The kid is being a 2-year-old. The parents are the ones that have the wrong expectations. It's sort of like, hey, lady, there's nothing wrong with your kid. Like, what's the matter with you? Why on earth would you think that a 2-year-old is going to sit through, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 14 and sit still the whole time? Like, why would you even think that would be okay, or a reasonable thing to do, or an appropriate thing to do? So taking ownership over what is appropriate behavior, like where is that accountability for that? Going back and looking at our childhood through that lens of who's accountable for what, and seeing kind of skewed adult expectations for what they are, or inappropriate adult behavior or inappropriate adult responses, and seeing child behavior for what it was, and not feeling like, not taking all of this on of, oh, I should have done better, I should have tried more, I should have, had knowledge and experience way outside my years, kind of a thing. Okay. Let's see. Thanks for the clarification, Cecilia. She says, well, there's only 9 Nightmare on Elm Street movies. That's funny. I didn't realize there was 9. I thought there were maybe up to 5 or 6. Jennifer says, I am always making white lies because I'm so bad with setting boundaries. And then once in a while, I blow up. I try not to because I hate that feeling of being aggressive. It makes me feel crazy. This is part of getting your sea legs. And it's unfortunately very normal. It's practicing a new skill. It's like any other skill. When you take up painting, let's say, for example, you're like, man, I painted this way too dark, and this other area over here is way too light, and the shading is kind of off. And okay, I see, when you're learning how to kind of work with the medium, and but every time you do a painting, you're learning new things and you're developing that skill. And boundaries is the exact same way. So the making white lies, the good thing is that you can see this. So really that first step is awareness, because like I was saying earlier, this kind of behavior, it's a way we've all, not all of us, a way a lot of us have been navigating our environment for a very long time. We learned this somewhere down the road, that telling the truth, being assertive is not not a good thing, or that can cause harm, or that can get us in trouble, right? Or that's rude. There's some sort of negative consequence to being tactful and assertive. And so we, instead of doing that, we learned how to get our needs met in a different way, which often includes white lies. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of society does this. And um, and people, because it's that need to feel, I don't want to be rude, I don't want to rock the boat, I'm just going to tell myself this is not a big deal, this is not a big deal, I'm going to let things slide, I'm going to let things slide, and then things build, and then boom, we explode. Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of it. And all we can do in those times is to kind of do an autopsy, I guess, of this situation afterwards, and figure out, okay, what happened here? And how did we get to this result? And again, coming from a place of curiosity and not judgment. Okay, I had a really difficult, like I panicked into error, and I just said that I lied when I didn't need to. I made up this stupid white lie about getting stuck in traffic, and like that wasn't at all. Or I lied and said I had a headache when I didn't. Um, Being honest with yourself and being like, okay, why? Why? Where did this discomfort come from? And is it more prevalent around certain people? You know, and just kind of examining this and getting clear on why that is. Um, once it takes, like I said, it takes a lot of practice, and it's a lot easier if you can practice this with somebody that you feel like emotionally safe with, whether it's a potentially, a friend, a significant other, a therapist, a life coach, whoever. Practicing being uncomfortable and asserting yourself. Um, and I think once you do it a few times and you just realize, like, you get comfortable with the truth. But getting comfortable with the truth, you have to be comfortable having boundaries. So do you see how, like, all of this stuff is so interwoven? So when we realize that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to be human, that it's okay to have boundaries, when we get comfortable with our truth, we no longer feel the need to cover it up. So before, we might have felt the need to lie. We'd go into work and say, "Oh gosh, I got stuck in traffic." And the reality is we overslept, you know, uh, to just own it and just say, gosh, I am so sorry I'm running late. I overslept. It, welcome to being human. It does happen. Uh, you know, like, there's no need to lie about the little things. And so once we start getting comfortable being honest with ourselves and being honest with other people about the little things, and we realize, like, their reaction tends to be about the same as if we just, whether you got stuck in traffic or whether you overslept, they're going to be slightly annoyed. Like, their reaction's going to be the same. When we realize we're not going to, that they're going to handle it like a reasonable adult, then it sort of, okay, life will go on. If they don't handle it like a reasonable adult and they start, yelling or threatening or all of this, then realizing, okay, this isn't going to work for me, because we all make mistakes. Like, mistakes by definition don't happen on purpose, right? So I'm not going to tolerate being talked to this way. So something's going to have to give, right? Like, we can either talk to them about it, or we can just start looking for another job. But, owning our behavior, doing the steps necessary so that it won't happen again, or just being accountable for stuff. So, and then same thing when we blow up, is also examining what happened here. Um, and not minimizing it, not being like, oh, I just had a bad day, or I've been really stressed out lately, or whatever, but being on, and that honesty starts with being honest with yourself. And that's really difficult, because people that struggle with this, and I get it, because I do too still, we are so used to lying to ourselves. about what's bothering us. We're so used to glossing over things and minimizing it and trying to convince ourselves that something isn't a, a big deal, or something isn't a concern when it actually is. So getting clear with yourself of, oh gosh, actually, yeah, that was that's what was going on there. And if you're with another, if this issue, this friction is happening with a person that, there's that potential for that relationship to develop, or that if they've already shown you that they're an emotionally safe person, like you've known them for a while, you've gone through, quite a few different situations with them, uh, it gets easier and easier to work through these situations, because then you can be more open and honest about kind of what happened and why. So let's see. Gavin says, why are narcissists or abusive people more empathetic to strangers than their own spouses and children? I think a lot of that it depends on the person, I guess, and kind of what their motives are. So for some, it's all about appearances and that need to look a certain way. Oh, I have the facade. Oh, I need the world to think that I am just this caring, loving person, and at all times. I don't really care what my family thinks. I just need other people to think that, right? So you have some narcissists or abusive people with that mentality. Um, you have others where it's more of an entitlement kind of thing. Like they really feel that their family is an extension of them. And so therefore they're entitled to treat them however they want, because in their mind, and it's a lack of understanding boundaries. That's the problem with narcissists and abuse in general. It's you're dealing with a boundaryless person. So, in their mind, other people, uh, shouldn't have boundaries. They should always get their way. They shouldn't be ever, told no. They should always be treated with dignity and respect. But everybody else around them is, however they want to treat them is fine. That everybody else, they have to earn their love and their, dignity, and being treated with dignity and being treated with respect. And that's the problem. So, because of course, with your family, you're with these people day in and day out. Um, it's a lot easier to be, when there's not that emotional connection, all that water under the bridge. It's a lot easier to be kind of understanding, or to kind of keep up appearances. But it's a lot harder when, there's stress, there's frustration, there's anger, there's people saying no, there's different wants and needs and thoughts and opinions at play. So, okay, Shay. Let's see here. Oh, I was afraid that was going to happen. Hold on, Shay. I'm going to find your comics. I saw that you posted it a couple times. Okay, she said, Dana, my ex packed up and moved across the country after 5 years with me, only telling me after he had left. I feel devastated while he's moved on. Any insights and suggestions on how to cope? Oh boy. Yes. Yes. Hold on. Let me take some water here. Well, I would, there is, yes, there's so many things. I would encourage you to see his actions as a reflection of him and not a reflection of you. It's incredibly immature and hurtful and painful for him to just kind of sneak off in the middle of the night like that, and not be able to have a talk with you about the ending of a relationship or, um, anything else. So, and then to kind of realize too that you can't have a relationship with a person who can't communicate effectively. And if he was unhappy, if there was somebody else, if there whatever was going on with him, if this was news to you and it was out of the clear blue, then th- he wasn't communicating um, effectively during the relationship. And so this relationship, because of that, because there was no honesty or sincere communication on his end, or comfort on his end with communicating, then that relationship had an expiration date on it from the beginning, because that has to be there, that ability to communicate and, um, be able to express our needs and, um, work together as a team and all of that. So I guess I would try to just continue to remind yourself that even though it's incredibly painful right now, like this really was for the best, because this would have never worked out for the long term. And that this didn't have the potential. There's nothing that you could have done different. If this is how he handles things, then it wasn't going to work. But it's okay. I mean, with any ending of any relationship, no matter how good or how bad, it's kind of a shock to the system, and there's pain, and there's a kind of a mourning the loss of what we had, or mourning the loss of what we thought we had. And it's hard. I would encourage you to um, to keep reminding yourself of that, to not get caught up in the nostalgia or the what if or whatever, but to really see that behavior clearly. Like, this kind of stuff's not workable. That this relationship couldn't have worked. Like, even if you were to come back tomorrow, it this can't work. There's no trust present. There's no communication. Like this, you need a relationship with a person who has mature communication skills, and he ain't it. So when we're hurt by something, that generally tends to go hand in hand with a perceived loss. And it can help to soften the pain when we can get clear with ourselves that we didn't lose anything, that losing something that wasn't good for us in the long term, it's actually a gain. It's not a loss. That can help. The emotions are still there. Like the saying goes, it kind of takes a little while for the heart to catch up with the head. The emotions are still there. But if you can remind yourself, like, this is a change, this is going to be a new chapter in your life, but you didn't lose a relationship. Like, you lost the relationship you thought you had, but the relationship you actually had was clearly very, very different than what you thought you had. And so it's okay to mourn the loss of what you thought you had. I've been there too. Especially when the rug gets pulled out from underneath you that quickly. It just takes a while to get your bearings back. But yeah, the relationship you thought you had and the relationship you had are two very different things in these kind of situations. Let's see. Let me scroll up. Bonnie was saying JJ had a good question here. Okay, how do you handle the overt narcissists versus more of like the introverted? Are you talking like more like covert, like overt and covert narcissists? I guess at the end of the day, I handle everybody the same way. Um, and I would encourage you to consider doing the same. Your boundaries are your boundaries are your boundaries. It doesn't matter. It's like if somebody's, I don't know, setting fires in your house, it doesn't matter if it's a person with malicious intent, or if it's your 6-year-old, or if it's who's playing with matches, or if it's, um, you know, your grandmother with Alzheimer's. You can't have somebody setting things on fire in your house. So you're going to take appropriate action to keep yourself safe, and potentially them too, right? So the only difference tends to be how we feel about it. So I guess you could say some of the actions are a little bit different. Um, I guess very different in how we respond, but the boundary we set is going to be the same. Like, I can't have somebody setting fires in my house. If it's the dangerous X, it's going to be to call the police and try to get a restraining order. If it's the 6-year-old child, it's taking matches away from them. If it's the grandparent that has Alzheimer's that's doing it, it's going to be, I don't know, disabling the stove knobs, or putting a jingle bell on the outside of their door so you can hear it if they're opening it. You're going to be taking some sort of protection action, because you can't have somebody setting your house on fire. How you interact with an overt narcissist, or a covert narcissist, or simply a difficult coworker, or your witchy sister, or your crazy mother-in-law, or your whoever it might be, it's going to be the same. So if your principle there is that you have value, and that you expect to be treated with dignity and respect, basic human right. I mean, it's not something that like, it's just part of basic human rights, completely appropriate. Then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're a sociopath, or a narcissist, or an overt narcissist, or covert, or uh, uh, you name it. It doesn't matter. It's going to be setting boundaries. So the difference is, I guess, going to be with how you go about setting those boundaries, which I would say it would be the same way. So, uh, I would just assert yourself, and um, it's going to be some things, either, if something's not okay with you, it's not okay with you. It's not because the person's a narcissist that it's not okay with you, generally. If somebody wants you to, I don't know, they keep asking to borrow money, or they keep pushing a line with you. You're just going to keep holding that line and say, no, I don't loan money to people. It's too stressful. Or I don't, whatever it is. So being able to draw your line and just say, no, this isn't working for me. If that's not working and they're trying to push back, which often this is going to happen with most boundaries, is we'll set a boundary, then the person's going to want to argue it. Then kind of thinking that through, okay, how are you going to hold the boundary again? So, and then what happens if they keep fighting you about it? Oh, you should loan me money. I'm your brother. I can't believe you wouldn't loan me money. I would loan you money if you really needed it. I would do that for you. And boy, you sure are selfish. And I can't believe you would do this. Boy, blah, 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 blah. Then what? Then how are you going to handle it? Kind of a thing. And so boundaries, we're going to have to take different approaches to continue redrawing those lines with somebody. And let me just be clear on this, because this is something that, again, trips a lot of people up, myself included, for a very long time. Standing there and pointing at your line in the sand and restating your boundary is not drawing a boundary. That's delaying drawing a boundary. So pointing out, I told you that I this is not okay. I'm not going to please not call me again asking for money. It's causing fights between me and my spouse. Uh, we can't have this. We're not going to, please don't ask this again. And they show up at your house and then they're asking for money. And then you're having the same conversation with them again, or they're calling your spouse and then you guys are having the same conversation again. If you're having the same conversation over and over and you're pointing out your boundary to people over and over, the same person over and over again, you're just delaying drawing a boundary. So then the next boundaries, in order for it to be effective, needs to have some sort of consequence. Because otherwise, you just saying no is just kind of it's meaningless if there's not anything that you're willing to back it up with. So it's when you're saying, this is my line in the sand, like I'm either okay with this or I'm not okay with this, to be able to back it up. So just like we were talking about earlier, the person that was working in healthcare and they were saying, oh, they were wanting to advocate for their rights. And they were kind of getting this pushback from management. And say, oh, you guys, we don't want you to wear masks. We don't want you to wear this. We don't want you to wear that. If their boundary is, you know what, I value myself and I have to work in an environment that also values me, then I'm going to wear a mask. This is my line in the sand. This is not unreasonable. This is a completely reasonable, appropriate request given this time that we're living in. And I need for you guys to respect this. If you don't respect this line in the sand, then I'm going to have to do something different. I'm either going to need to look for another job, or you guys are going to have to fire me. Something's going to have to happen, but I'm not going to be continuing to go to work without a mask. So, yeah, it just being clear with your boundary and then figuring out, so with consequences, if you're telling somebody, if you're continually asserting yourself and they're continually crossing that line, we're going to continue setting it, but taking more and more action to keep yourself safe. So if your first line of defense is being assertive, that doesn't work. Okay, then what are you going to do? And that's going to really depend on the person and the situation. Because keeping yourself, setting boundaries, it's about protecting you. It's not about punishing other people. So how you have to go about protecting yourself from people is going to be different from person to person. If you've got a crazy ex who's stalking you, how you set a boundary with them is going to be very different than how you might set a boundary with your 96-year-old grandma who doesn't understand why you can't come over and visit every Sunday with the virus, right? So with some people, boundaries have to continually get tightened up to where you're like, you know what, I just can't have this in my life. We've asked you to not call for money. You keep calling for money. You're not respecting our boundaries. And so now, basically we just need to end contact, because this isn't a respectful exchange here. This is you being threatening and demanding and using guilt and pity and intimidation to try to get me to do what you want. And I've already told you we're not doing that. So I don't have relationships with people that disrespect me like this. Like, this is not okay. But doing that to a person who is potentially dangerous or unhinged or whatever is not a good idea, right? So it's going to depend on this situation and the person. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Enchanted Order says, ugh, my hubby still has his job. They had masks before everything shut down, but someone stole them. So no masks for anyone at the job. He's going to 3D print himself a mask this next week. I wanted to share with you guys too, masks. There's a video, well, there's probably lots of videos on YouTube there's one, it's called No Sew masks. And it's basically, it requires 2 hair ties or 2 rubber bands and like a square of fabric, like a bandana. Okay. And here's what I would do with this too. So coffee filters, the white coffee filters have been shown to help reduce transmission. So this is something that you could do in a pinch. Okay. This is what I've been using. Um, just because I don't want to buy the medical masks. And I hardly leave I just leave the house to get groceries and stuff. But take a coffee filter, watch one of these videos on these no sew masks. It's a way you fold the bandana up and then you put the rubber bands around it and then you use the rubber bands to hook it around your ears. It works great. And it's better than nothing. So I don't know what the percentage of protection would be, but I would say it'd probably be close to 50 or 60%. So protection and transmission. So something is better than nothing. So I would consider doing something like that until you can get something better. It just really gets me going that a lot of environments don't support this. And I would encourage you, if you are an employer or if you work for a company, these masks, these are probably going to be, realistically, they're going to be our new normal for quite a while. And it's something that we just need to get used to. I think it's part of good customer service. It's part of being a good leader in your company. It's part of being a respectful human being to other coworkers, to other people. This is the time that we're living in. But these masks, they don't have to be scary. I mean, we can have fun with them. You can get white, I don't know, if you have an old sheet, cut up an old sheet and make a mask and put like a coffee filter in the middle of it. And you could draw like a little word balloon on the outside that says hello, or something, I don't know, I'm wearing this mask because I care about you, or something, and you could have, if you cut up an old white sheet, you can make a lot of masks out of that. So you can change the things that you say on there. It doesn't have to be this serious, scary thing. We can have fun with it. So there's also videos out there too on um, making hand sanitizer. And so some of the other things that I'm doing, I just ordered some stuff from Amazon. I'll be making my own hand sanitizer because we're totally out everywhere around here. I'm in Michigan. And, you can do some quick Google searches, but, it's basically the kind of non-sticky aloe vera gel. And I want to say it's at least 70% alcohol, the isopropyl alcohol. And you can use, like tea tree oil or something that's antifungal, antibacterial, or that you can just call it good with that and use a different essential oil. And you can make a ton of it. So you can order these jugs on Amazon. And even if you've got bottles around your house that are, hold on to this kind of stuff. Like if you have bottles that are refillable, that are, that you can keep with you to do that. So that's a thought. They have mister bottles that you could normally probably would use for your hair or for plants, that you put liquid in and then it just creates a fine mist. You can put hydrogen peroxide in those, or you can put, like the 70 or above the isopropyl alcohol in that and mist things. Again, it's not a substitute to, fully scrubbing everything down, but it's something. And I think it's a bunch of these little things that we can do that really do add up. Oh, that's clever. Enchanted Art says, I made my own masks out of a bathing suit I never wore. No sewing machine. I leave the foam cup in it and put coffee filters in it. Yeah, that's really clever. I like it. Okay, sorry. Let's see here. Okay, Montana says Dana, reasonable. Now that is something I question often. I realize now it's likely because I'm told I'm irrational, etc., since birth. I don't know how to reprogram. I can't hear my internal dialogue. It's like all of me. Yes, that makes sense. It's very easy to get knocked off balance if we're not sure what reasonable is. And I think a lot of normal, decent people, uh, we want to be team oriented, right? Like we want to be reasonable. So if somebody's saying, you know what, that's not reasonable, then it really rattles us. We're like, oh my gosh, um, am I being difficult? Am I being unreasonable? Like, where is the line for this? And I guess it depends on kind of the boundary that you're setting. Um, I'm trying to think of some examples here. If it involves you, I guess. So you decide what's appropriate and inappropriate for you, nobody else. Like you decide, well, we all have done this already. Like we just haven't consciously thought about it, but you know where your line in the sand is with what kind of jokes you find funny and not funny, or with what kind of behavior that you is uncomfortable or comfortable for you. If you're on a first date with somebody and they put their hand on your tush, and you're like, whoa, hello, no, I don't think so. Not okay. Or um, somebody makes, I don't know, a racist or just off color joke, right? And they might even think it's hilarious. And maybe it's not even extreme like racist or sexist. Maybe it's just 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 kind of dark humor or just stuff that you don't like, or they use language that you're not okay with. If you're not comfortable around it, then that's the line. This isn't about there. It's not, you don't need to be like workable on this like stuff. It's either okay with you or it's not. That's where boundaries are such an individual thing. My kind of humor, the way that I joke with my brother is very different than the way that I joke with my mother. Because and probably the way that she jokes with me is very different than the way that she jokes with her friends. And that's where it's kind of finding that middle ground of with other people, of we don't have to agree with somebody else. If your boundary is, well, I'm not gonna, let's say if you and I are dating, if you're like, you know what, my boundary is I don't have sex until marriage, it's, who am I to say, oh, that's not reasonable? That's your boundary for your body, for yourself. Or even if I was your friend and I would be like, well, that's not reasonable. Well, like I don't get to vote, right? Like it's not my place. Like that's your boundary. It's okay. It's okay to like what you like and to not like what you don't like. And it has nothing to even do with another person's intentions. Like another person doesn't have to be like a complete creep or intentional or malicious in their behavior. It could simply be that they're a normal, decent person who just has a different set of boundaries. And that doesn't, and then it's going to be finding kind of that middle ground. Like, for example, I had this coworker, I used to work for a builder a long time ago. And so it's, kind of a rough environment. And and I can make a sailor blush. Like I have a mouth on me at times. And we would, we all, the vast majority of us in the office had the same sense of humor. We would have, there was no, I mean, a lot of it was just really immature humor. Okay. Let's just put it that way. And there was one woman in the office who did not find us funny. She did not like the way that we joked or some of the language that we used. And that's perfectly fine. Like, she's completely entitled to have a problem with that. And so because we didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable, we didn't joke like that or talk like that when she was around, because because it wasn't funny to her. It was just upsetting to her. And our goal wasn't to upset her, so we were able to find that middle ground pretty easily, because it wasn't that big of a thing. Like, we could wait until she left. So it depends. I'm trying to think. Where reasonable, I think, tends to maybe get more confused is when it has to do with accountability. Like, where is that line for appropriate accountability? Where is that line for, and I guess it goes back to accountability. Where's that line of what we have control over and what we don't have control over? So, for example, you've got somebody who keeps asking you for money, sibling, a parent, whoever. Let's say it's your parent. Keeps asking you for money, and it's really negatively impacting your marriage. Your spouse is like, you know what? We've given them money. They don't repay us, and they don't seem to care that this is causing issues in our marriage. And your father's gotta, they need to handle their money better. Like, we can't keep bailing them out. Like, this is just, it's not good. And then they say, and you say no to them. Well, how dare you do this? I am your mother. I raised you. I put a roof over your head. And they're putting all this guilt on you, right? You're not being reasonable. This isn't appropriate. Or you're hearing from other people, how could you not help your mother out? She's your mother. My goodness, you owe it to her. Yes, I know she's got a gambling problem, or she's a hoarder, or she's a spender, or whatever it might be. Or they're just financially irresponsible. I know they just went on a cruise, and now they come crying to you about it because they don't have money to pay the bill, or that their electricity is going to get shut off, kind of a thing. When we understand, like, what's appropriate adult behavior, like where we start and end and where another person starts and end, I think it helps to make that line of what's reasonable a lot more clear. So I guess it's understanding kind of the difference between, like, what is enabling behavior, what is empowering, like, appropriate behavior, what is kind of detrimental behavior. We're not responsible for another adult. Especially, it's one thing if you can comfortably help somebody out and that you want to, and that you feel that this is not enabling them. But I don't know, like, if your mom's furnace goes out in her house, and she's hard time, she lost her job due to the virus, and she doesn't have credit cards or whatever it might be, and you're like, okay, I'm willing, I can comfortably do this. Like, this isn't something I need to lie to my spouse about or hide or whatever. With my spouse, we're a unified front on this, that we're gonna buy this for my mom, or that we're gonna loan her the money, that we're gonna do whatever. That's one thing. It's another thing to just be like, oh yeah, my mom called, furnace went out. Well, she's spending money on everything else, but putting money in her savings account. I can't, no, we're not. She's gonna have to figure it out, because we're just enabling this kind of behavior. And so we're not doing that anymore. So does that help as far as reasonable? It really just goes back to getting a good sense of what is appropriate accountability, and like what is an inappropriate accountability. Like that level of inappropriate accountability is, oh, you're responsible for another adult. You're responsible to help to lend your deadbeat brother money because he called you because he's family, or you're somehow responsible for for an irresponsible adult. Basically, that's inappropriate. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. It looks like Denora had a question. Okay. Okay, so Denora asks, Dana, I've been no contact for over a year and I've been working on my healing. My son, who's 13, has shown narcissistic behaviors. My question is, how can I help him acquire empathy? This is a big one for a couple different reasons. So, one, he's entering his teenage years. So, that level of narcissism tends to be high. Normally, there's a kind of a healthy degree of narcissism in that age where kids are breaking away, they're becoming more independent. That's the challenge of a teenager is, their job is basically to kind of question everything and to, fight the power kind of a thing, and to figure out who they are outside of their parents. But then it's your job as a parent to hold that line and to keep rules and structure. So there's that inherent friction that's going to be there until they move out. Basically, that's one aspect of it. But if this, so I guess some degree of this is normal. The lack of empathy, though, is concerning, and this is a very common thing when kids have experienced. Either they've witnessed abuse of any kind, verbal, emotional, physical, you name it, and or they've experienced it themselves. And the lack of empathy tends to go hand in hand with a lot of that defensiveness of it's the defense mechanism of like I kind of don't need anybody. I don't need you. I'm wantless. I'm needless. Like it's that fierce independence. And that tends to be that defense mechanism of um, letting people in and being honest gets me hurt. So being attached to other people is not safe, is basically where that comes into play. To start working on this kind of behavior, um, I guess first and foremost, especially with, well, it's anybody really, but especially with kids, the biggest thing is going to be to really double down, triple down on cultivating a healthy, a strong relationship with him. Because when somebody's already in that fight mode of they're defensive, you know, they're angry, there's, like I was saying earlier, when that defensiveness is present, connection is not. And so anytime you're gonna try to lay down the rules, you're gonna continue to say no, you're everything that you're doing, setting boundaries, is going to come across as an attack. And it's going to have, and there's a very strong chance that it's going to have the exact opposite effect. And the older he gets, the more out of control he's going to get. He's just going to lash out more. So before you start, it's kind of like, how does the saying go? Before someone cares what you say, they have to know you care. And there's so much truth in that. So I would start thinking about ways that you can reconnect with him and grow your relationship with him and establish that you're in his corner. Because it sounds like he definitely, if you're no contact with his dad, then he probably had a lot of feelings and anger and hurt and confusion, all of that he also needs to work through. But he might also be putting a lot of that on you too. Because it's easier to be mad, regardless of how awful your ex was. It's easier for kids to be mad at the parent who's there than it is for the parent who's not. So some of the things that you can start doing, and I would encourage all parents to do this during my time working with at-risk adolescents. And um, I just remember I would sit there like every day and I'm like, man, here these parents are going to therapy, they're doing all of these things with their kids, but they're not doing the basic things. They're not spending time. They're not going out like, hey, kiddo, um, you know, let's me and you have dinner together, or let's go out for a soda, or bonding with your kid in a way that your child would want to bond with you, right? So if their big thing is they are big into video games and you're not, offering to learn and playing those video games with them. It's finding whatever door that's somewhat door of interest that's cracked open. That's the door that's a good place to start. If they're interested in something, kind of go with that. You get interested in it. This is about us meeting them where they are, not them meeting us where we are. So once they know that you care and we're making that time and we're not pushing it, there's no agenda here other than just letting your kid know that you like them and that you love them and that you're there for them. So you're just establishing that emotional safety. And oftentimes in time, when kids realize that they can talk to you, that they can trust you, that you are in their corner, they'll start to open up. Down the road with empathy, I guess I would literally have that be a down the road thing, because that's going to require a lot of that defensiveness and anger to be processed before that empathy can be given a chance to grow. If your child, it's such a tough age. If they were younger, if your child was younger, then kind of there's more opportunity for like teachable moments. So you can verbalize things more of, well, and of course it'd be different too if we weren't in quarantine, going to like a petting zoo, right? And talking about, the animal has space and how to, be considerate basically of other living creatures. And it's a lot easier to do this with animals, especially cute animals, than it is, or even with nuts. I don't know. Some kids really are drawn to not so cute animals, but whatever it is, getting their interest that way, and then having that conversation about learning about the animal. What is the animal like? Oh, okay. The horse doesn't like it when you stand behind him, or when you approach him from the side and he can't see you, or when you make loud noises or move suddenly. It's not about what we want, right? It's about when we're interacting with others, it's finding that line of where are their boundaries, what's okay with them, and taking that into consideration. It's not all about us. It's a little more difficult the older they get, because those kinds of conversations can come across as condescending. There's some, there's probably apps and stuff out there. There's I'd have to look for questions. It's like tabletop questions. Those are good. Literally keep them on your table kind of a thing. If you guys making it a thing where you have dedicated family time with, you and him, or you do him and the other kids, or whatever the dynamic is, same time every week, you guys schedule it and you maintain it. And even if the kids, and it doesn't have to be long, it can be an hour. It doesn't have to be serious either. It can be where you guys rotate, where you pick a movie or he picks a movie, or, you're just spending time together doing the same thing. and ideally interacting, but that can come down the road. But ideally just spending time, letting him know that, hey, you're important to me, kind of a thing. But anyways, these questions games, these are great ways to kind of get conversations going. There's one here. I've actually got one right here. There's a whole bunch of different like therapy games and stuff that are out there. Let me grab some of these cards. It's kind of getting to know each other type stuff. So this, one of the questions is, talk about a celebrity you admire. Or the next one is, complete this sentence. My favorite time of day is ... Or what kind of books do you enjoy reading the most and why? These kinds of things. When kids, especially, I mean, it's interesting. These things, I think these things are just interesting in general. You know, it's getting to know another person at different levels of another person. A lot of times kids do want to be known and they do like to answer questions. So that can be a good way to kind of get them going and they're not feeling attacked because it's just a general question that you're asking, and then they can pick a card and ask you a question, or you guys can both answer the questions. These kinds of things. Down the road, as far as establishing empathy goes, it can help to have, just like I was talking about, having your child around animals. You could ask scenarios. So noticing, okay, wow, that was, what did you think about that? The scenario of that guy hitting that dog, or why do you think he did that? Kind of asking questions and opening up that conversation. And you know, same thing, like, well, what makes for a good friend? Or how do you know when a person's a good friend versus when they're a bad friend? Or questions that are more geared towards exploring empathy. Okay, let's see here. Oh, good. Denora says, okay, this already makes good sense. I can use this advice. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah. Some of the other things that you can do too with kids that are really defensive is let them overhear you saying good things about them. Now that's a little bit more contrived, but it's helpful. And it can really do wonders, because then they're like, oh, wow, you know, mom really, or whoever, mom, dad, whoever really means it. So if you're on the phone with a friend and you know that they might be kind of listening or can kind of hear, you brag on them a little bit. Oh, you know, man, I just have the neatest kid. Let me tell you what little Johnny did the other day. Like, he's so clever. He's so funny. He's so whatever, like a specific compliment. And you could even do this in front of them too. And then if they're like, oh, mom, I can't believe you did that, blah, blah, blah. Just be like, what? You're my kid. I want to brag. You know? So stuff like that can help too. Cultivating that relationship. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this, but then this is a powerful thing. We talk about trauma bonds oftentimes in a negative context, right? So this is the trauma bonds. It's the bonds that are formed between two people during trauma. And it's generally more one-sided. That tends to be the problem. Oh, well, thank you. Why Lockett for the live stream donation says, thank you, Dana, for being you. That was nice. I appreciate that. These trauma bonds, they're forged between highs and lows of experiences. It's the fear of the threat and then the relief of the safety. So for example, these are the kind of bonds that a hostage might feel for the kidnapper, kind of a thing, where the kidnapper says something, I'm gonna, I don't know, I'm gonna kill you, right? And then the hostage is like, oh my goodness, and they're terrified. But then the kidnapper brings them a glass of water or says, oh, I'm not really going to. And they're like, oh, they're so relieved. And it's these highs and lows. These kinds of bonds are forged in a multitude of ways. This is one of the reasons the bond with an abusive person and their partner, or whoever's the bond between an abusive person and the other person is so strong. It's in part due to those trauma bonds. However, and the reason trauma bonds are so strong, it's the psychology behind it. It's the intensity of the fear of loss and then the relief of safety, kind of a thing. The psychology of this doesn't have to just involve like extreme situations like a hostage environment or like an abusive relationship. It can also be, and it is, any type of situation that involves extremes like that. So this is something to keep in mind too, especially with kids. It's a good way to connect with kids. And so it can be done. I'm not saying like traumatize your child. No, it can be done in ways that are that actually build healthy bonds, but it's using the psychology behind a trauma bond. So for example, going on a roller coaster, it's fear and excitement peppered with the relief of the safety. It's it's literally the highs and lows. And so when you're done on getting off a roller coaster, it's that feeling of we went through this together. It's a bonding experience. These kinds of highs and lows, interestingly enough, this is also something that is experienced if a person watches a scary movie with another person or some sort of thriller where another person is going through a series of highs and lows. When that movie's over, those people feel more connected because they also went through that, even though they didn't. Strange, right? So some ways that you can create the kind of this bonding is through, well, I mean, again, it's different because of quarantine and everything, but escape rooms offer this. It's working as a team. It's the pressure. It's, you know, this kind of thing of, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then it's the relief of hopefully getting it figured out, right? Or there's these different challenge courses where you have to climb up a pole and then hop to a trapeze, or you have to do these kinds of scary things. That's why these events, this is why oftentimes work environments have these kinds of challenge courses for employees, because it is team building. It truly is trauma bonding. It's bonding. This kind of, it's like the difference between going through boot camp with somebody and being in a book club with them. So boot camp is intensely more bonding. Book club is bonding as well, but nothing like the intensity of boot camp. So if you can find these experiences that involve a degree of excitement, ideally not fear, but excitement, excitement and relief, adventurous kind of things, those can create bonds, and that can really help to open kids up. It's wild how well that can work. So just something to kind of consider too. Okay, let's see here. Let me Jennifer says, I think that's how I feel with my dad. Even though he abused me, I still feel like we were in it together because he didn't want to go to prison and I didn't want harm to come to him. Yes. And that's the challenge with any type of abusive parent or abusive person in general. There becomes, it's like there's three people in that relationship. There's the abusive person, there's the person they're abusing, and then there's like the abusive behavior. So the abusive side of them, right? Because the abusive side oftentimes isn't their only side. There's normally the good side to them. So it's like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You're in a relationship with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So there's three of you in this relationship. And that creates to others, right? So like in your situation with the police and him going to jail, it creates this us against them. And it does with any type of person who's being abusive and their target. It's this very bonding experience that people go through, and it's very confusing for the person being abused for that very reason. It's like, well, I like the Dr. Jekyll, but the Mr. Hyde is awful. But no, but it's not always Mr. Hyde or Mrs. Hyde, right? There's sometimes that Dr. Jekyll, and I just feel, and you're just so torn going back and forth with that, especially a child. Children are they're biologically hardwired to connect to their parent. That's for survival. So, and it's heartbreaking because you'll see this with kids is they will lie, they will minimize, they will defend an abusive parent for a very, very, very long time. And sometimes up until they die. Because it's a lot of it's the kind of being with the devil we know versus the devil we don't. And then it's also a lot of the manipulation. Families forever, nobody's perfect, all parents love their children. They had a bad childhood, this kind of thing, that especially telling a child that, it really gets them confused. So there are those trauma bonds of this person who I love and who says who loves me, but sometimes hurts me. And, I don't want them to get in trouble because I care about them, but I also don't want them to keep hurting me. Like, what do I do? What do I do? It's, yeah, it's tragic, and it's all part of abuse, unfortunately. Cecilia says, I don't want to willingly trauma bond with anyone, LOL. Yeah. And you know what? I don't blame you, and that's fine too. I think it's just understanding the psychology behind it. So, not saying that you have to be all kind of nefarious with how you get through to people, but just knowing the psychology that if you're going to spend time, especially with kids, or you're trying to kind of to crack that door to be able to help in that kind of a way, to know, okay, if I'm going to be spending time with them, like this is going to be we're going to get a lot farther if we're spending time doing adventurous, exciting things versus potentially, things that are not. Yeah. And this Susanna was saying, this is my problem with my spouse. She is Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde. What do I do? This is that's very difficult. So there's a lot of factors, I guess, to consider with this kind of a thing, and it would be, I guess, first and foremost, I would want to know, is she dangerous? Is she potentially dangerous? Um, I would use that as kind of a way to guide your behavior. It's difficult now. We have the added challenge of quarantine, and people can't so readily leave, whether it's you or her. But um, I would say, uh, when there's an imbalance in a relationship, so in relationships, here's the thing too, is it's not just toxic or abusive relationships that get imbalanced. Whenever there's two people involved, there's going to be that continual balancing of understanding each other's boundaries and where, how to negotiate. It's constant, um, learning how to work as a team, and that's going to require, open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. It doesn't require that two people be, completely healthy and have it all figured out, but it does require their ability, their desire to be solutions oriented, and their ability to have that open, honest, and sincere communication. So, and even if that communication is, um, I'm really frustrated or I'm really angry and I need to, uh, I can't talk about this right now, or that they're able to at least kind of say what they need, um, or to acknowledge when they're being, when their behavior is not okay. So if you were to say something like, it's like, it's okay for you to be frustrated, but it's not okay for you to yell at me, or to get so angry at me that I feel intimidated, you know? Or not, or maybe I should phrase that for you to be intimidating. Like, it's not okay to be threatening, intimidating, fear inducing, threatening to leave, threatening to divorce, threatening to hurt me, threatening to, you know, make me suffer in some sort of way, or to lash out at me or whatever. Like, that's not okay. Um, So the hard part is, we can't change another person. The only thing we can do is make it clear as to what we will and won't put up with. This is the challenge with anybody that has problematic behavior. So you've probably, with, if you're familiar at all with like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, that's really at the core of it, is realizing, okay, if I am allowing this behavior to continue, I am enabling it. And that can be a, um, a tough pill to swallow if we're in an abusive relationship. And again, I'm not saying that this is your fault or that your responsibility or any of that, but what happens oftentimes when we're in a relationship with a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of person, is their behavior is so manipulative, and the fear, it's so fear and anxiety inducing, that, and we don't, it's a price we don't want to pay. So we tend to fall in line, right? We avoid confrontation. We walk on eggshells, and thinking that if we just did more of that or did it better, that the relationship would be fine. But the reality is, no, that imbalance just grows more and more the more we give into it, and the more we walk on eggshells. Like, the only way to really make that type of a relationship work is for that imbalance to become balanced. But it's going to require that other person having the motivation to change. And most people, whether it's if they're struggling with alcoholism or addiction or, bad behavior, hurtful behavior, then there's, you know, I mean, they're denying it, they're deflecting it, they're not wanting to see it for what it is. They're not being accountable for it. So they don't have that pain needed to change, because change always requires pain. We have to be motivated to do something other than what we're doing. So that's where it can be so difficult for a spouse or a partner of somebody who has some sort of destructive behavior, whether it's, drugs, alcohol, or abusive behavior, to to get to the point where it's like, you know what, I will not do this anymore. Either they, either this balance gets corrected, they either, start actively working on their behavior to get it more balanced, or I need to correct this imbalance by leaving. But I will not tolerate this anymore. So, and that's really tough. That's really tough. But oftentimes that's what it takes for, now here's the challenge, because that's what it takes with addiction, right? Alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be. It's that the kind of zero tolerance of this is what we will not be doing anymore. We will not be giving you money. We will not be calling in sick to work for you. We will not be making up excuses. You will not be able to come stay here or crash here or drink here or whatever. Like, we're not tolerating this anymore. And then couching that in love. Because again, that goes back to that, if defensiveness is present, then connection isn't. And if a person gets defensive, then they oftentimes get to the point of, well, you're not perfect, well, screw you, kind of a thing. And then it just shuts everything down and it's not effective. But if they're realizing, this is not me being a jerk, this is, I love you so much that I'm willing for you to risk being upset with me. And I'm doing this because I care. And I love you. But this, I don't love the alcoholism or the addiction or the abuse. And I can't have this. So, but if that's the challenge with abuse though, is because it's more like with alcohol or addiction, you're talking about, it's a substance. It's doing that one specific thing. I need you to not drink, to not use drugs. And that, of course, it sounds so oversimplified, right? But it's that one thing. You need to not use. That's it. And that goes a long way. With abuse, it's a mindset. It's a mindset of entitlement. It's a problem with basically non-existent boundaries. It's so much more deep-seated, and there's not just that one thing that person needs to do that's gonna, even, and I'm not saying that even with alcohol or drugs, that though they stop using and then problem solved, but it goes a long way towards, it's a big part of the problem right there, right? So there's still so many other issues that are now going to be able to be worked on, but they have to be sober in order for that stuff to start coming to the surface. But with abuse, there's so much, like they'd have to unlearn, destructive ways of interacting with others. They have to learn how to be assertive. They have to learn what appropriate boundaries are. They have to actually believe that they have to change their mindset about what's appropriate boundaries and what are inappropriate boundaries. There's just a lot that's there. So, and with abuse, it can, because again, abuse is that, it stems from that skewed mentality of in a skewed boundaries. It's that mentality of, well, I should be able to do whatever I want to do because I have reasons for it. So like, I'm frustrated, so I'm going to treat this other person like garbage because I'm frustrated. Oh, you forgot to buy ketchup at the store. Well, that's why I yelled at you. If you hadn't forgotten to buy ketchup, I wouldn't have yelled at you. And that's problematic boundaries. That's non-existent boundaries. Whereas a person with functional boundaries understands, you can be frustrated that I forgot to buy ketchup, but it's not okay for you to yell at me or to treat me like a child or to be condescending or rude or any of that. Be frustrated all you want. I'm frustrated too that I forgot to buy ketchup, but you know, I don't need 20 lashings for it. Like, that's ridiculous. So getting clear on, appropriate behavior and then finding alternatives to it if it tends to be the same. And then, so then thinking, okay, well, what are you going to do if, anyways, the problem, real quick, but the problem with abuse is this kind of behavior tends to escalate because it's that level of entitlement, and it's that person's operating from a skewed set of boundaries. And they aren't coming because when defensiveness is present, connection is not. They're not coming from that team-oriented, solutions-oriented place. They're coming from a place of power and control, of domination, of I win, you lose. I'm right, you're wrong. I should be able to do this, because everything, it's their mindset of, if I feel this way, then I'm entitled to act this way, because there's no boundaries there. There's no respect for other people. That's a problem. This stuff escalates quickly, and it can very quickly lead to physical abuse. That's why that is the inherent challenge with working with an abusive partner. And that's one of the reasons why the success rate is so low with getting, and I would even question if there even truly is a success rate. My guess is that the physical abusers that are court appointed to even go to abuse training programs, by and large, my guess is they have not even half, like 99% of them, 99.9995% of them just think it's an absolute joke and they get nothing out of it, frankly, because they don't want to be, they're not motivated to be there. They don't think they have the problem because they're entitled. So they're not learning anything anyhow. And the ones that do change their behavior, they might stop with the physical abuse, but then they're going to double down on the verbal abuse or the emotional abuse or whatever, because the root problem hasn't been addressed. And the root problem is the mindset. It's not the behavior. The behavior is a result of that mindset. So it's just so much more complicated than, than people realize. So, and like I said, it's just going to depend on your dynamic with her. And the other added challenge too is, with this type of a relationship, you're going to have to, like we were talking about earlier, for a boundary to be effective, it has to have a consequence. So you need to be able to be willing to back up whatever you say. So if she starts talking, talking to you like, really just being hateful and hurtful, right? Calling you names, putting you down, treating you with kind of disdain, contempt, or hostility. And if you were to say, and it can help, because to soften that defensiveness, to do kind of the whole sandwich technique, the kind of criticism compliment kind of a thing, to say, honey, she starts berating you. I can't believe you forgot to buy the ketchup. God, you're so stupid. I can't, what's wrong with you? I had you write it down. You forgot to write it down. Geez, it's just like having another child around here, blah, 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 right? Just real not cool, right? Or hateful, hurtful things. For you to say, you know what? I love you and I want us to be in a happy, healthy marriage. And I get that you're frustrated at me for not getting catch up. It was a mistake. And I get that you're frustrated, but please don't talk to me like that. It's not okay. That's going to make her see spots. She's going to go through the roof because she's not going to like it because she feels entitled for it. But then ending that, so that criticism, right, of like, that really, when you talk to me like that, that does damage, does a lot more damage. It does damage to me. It does damage to our relationship. And I love you. I want us to be happy and healthy. Can we handle this in a different way? That's hard because, again, when a person's in that fight mode, they're not looking to reach a solution. They're looking to win. They're looking to punish and to take out that aggression. So unless she has that emotional awareness where you can potentially get through to her, where she's able, if you're able to call her on her behavior in a calm, tactful, assertive way, and you guys are able to talk about it, this kind of thing, and you're actually able to start seeing changes, that's one thing. I just would get clear on your line in the sand with this kind of stuff. And, go from there. But it's going to be hard for her to have the motivation to change if you've been putting it up with it for a long time and she's like, okay, well, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Come on. Oh, you're not, and just prepare yourself for all of that. Oh, you're not perfect either. Oh, I can't, but oh, we're just going to focus on me, huh? Well, what about the time you did X, Y, and Z? And there's that defensiveness and deflection and instead of owning it. It's these skills are not taught, and it's really, really difficult to teach this kind of stuff to a partner, or somebody that you've known for a long time. Right. Cecilia says, at a certain point, there are some folks who cannot be negotiated with. I honestly tried this approach with my parents, but then they resorted to blaming me, kind of like, well, you made us treat you that way. Yeah. And that goes back to the reason we spin in circles with this is if this is how these conversations get to be crazy making, if we're interacting with somebody that doesn't have an appropriate understanding of functional boundaries, if there's no understanding of like where they start and stop and where other people start and stop and what's appropriate behavior, and they're not accountable for their behavior, then that's the kind of stuff that you get. So it's sort of like, well, yeah, we had to lock you in a closet. You were just, you were so naughty. You were coloring on the walls. And so we just had to do that. Or we had to, you were just into everything. I had to keep you in your high chair for 8 hours. This is the stuff that I have heard from parents that have abused their children. I had to do it. I had to do it. This was that's why they have sores, because I had to keep them in this spot because, they were getting into everything. It's like, well, no, you can't. That might be true that they were getting into things or that they were coloring or whatever, but your solution to it's not a viable solution. And they're a child, they're going to color, they're going to explore. Like, they're not the ones with the inappropriate behavior here, So with that, when you get to that point where you realize, okay, they're not owning their behavior, they're still coming at it from the standpoint of, look at what you made me do, then you're not dealing with another adult that's accountable. We all feel, come on. We all feel entitled to act, somebody cuts you off in traffic and we want to rear in their car, or we want to flip them off, or we want to yell things at them. We feel, man, they had it coming. Look at what you made me do, right? If you hadn't have cut me off in traffic, I wouldn't have had to pull a gun on you. Really? Like that, you can't do stuff like that. Like, that's how these things escalate. So even though we might feel this is reason, you forgot to buy ketchup, that's why I yelled at you. You, I caught you cheating. That's why I got my baseball bat and smashed up your car. Like, it's still, regardless of the reason, there's still consequences to actions. Like, actions might be understandable. Like, it's understandable, you get frustrated, your partner forgets something, you told him 10 times, like, "You've got to go to the bank and deposit this check, like, please, please, please don't forget, staple it to your hand if you have to, like, you have got to get this done today," and they forget again. And, and you just feel like you're gonna go through the roof, you're so frustrated, but you can't, because that's where appropriate boundaries come into place, right? Like, it's okay to feel how you feel, but it's not okay to pull out a gun on somebody, or to even really yell at another person who cuts you off in traffic, or it's not okay to be hateful and hurtful, period. It's just not okay. And even when we feel like, okay, this is completely justified, this person did like horrible crimes against humanity, responding in a hateful, hurtful way, it feels justified, right? Like, oh man, yeah. But it's still not a good thing, because then it changes us. It just drags everybody down. There's no benefit to that level of hatefulness and hurtfulness and frustration and anger and ugliness. Um, and we all have our moments. We all have our moments, and it's about being accountable for them and trying to have those moments become as infrequent as possible, to where we know we're able to slow things down enough to know, like, okay, I am cannot, I'm so stressed out right now. I am not going to be handling this well. I need to walk away. I cannot have this conversation. Like, these are where my boundaries are. This is what I need to have happen in order for me to handle this like an adult. Like, I can't, whatever it might be. Your family asks you to come over for Christmas for a week and they all make you nuts. You're done within 45 minutes of being there, and you have to get to the point where you realize, okay, I can't do this. I can't stay there for 7 days. It's not enjoyable at all for anyone involved. So I need to have a boundary instead of me trying to tolerate it and then exploding um, because of all of the craziness in this house. Like, I need to do something different. I need to be able to get up and go into the other room, or stay at a hotel, or know when to leave, or take a bunch of walks when I'm there. Something has to happen different, because my reaction to this and my inappropriate expectations of me expecting things to be different than they've always been, and my reaction to it, which is either might be explosive or whatever, understandable, but it's still not okay. It still contributes to that cycle of dysfunction. So it's not about them changing. It's about us changing what we have control over, which is ourselves and our reaction to things. And then hopefully, for their own sake, really, they'll change, because life's a hell of a lot easier when people can be open and honest and assertive, and there's not all of these dysfunctional games people are playing. But if they don't ever get there, then it doesn't really matter, because you've set your boundaries. So that craziness isn't spilling over. It's not sucking the sanity out of you. Like, it's being contained by your boundaries, you know? Let's see. Yes, I agree. Missouri Cowboy says abuse is not justified. There is no excuse for abuse. Right. Let's see here. Kamami is saying the domestic violence rate is so high all over the world right now, especially since quarantine started. I wonder when it will stop. Yeah, I really feel like the best oh gosh, solution to this more often than not is prevention, and a lot of that just starts from education. Again, this stuff's not taught. I mean, think about it. My goodness, like, how much smoother would life be if emotional health and wellness skills were taught starting at like age 2 in an age appropriate way? it just would be so much easier, so much easier. Um, let's see. Darlene was saying, I think we should understand how people think as best we can. His mom was confusing understanding with conformity and agreement, and we need to maintain our thoughts while understanding others. Yes. A lot of it too, is having the vocabulary for describing our experience. Um, like somebody was talking about earlier with that, or Montana was talking about earlier, that line for where is um, kind of responsibility, like where is appropriate behavior in this? And that's a hard line for most people. It's a hard place for most people to find, you know. Um, and it can help learning about these different things, just learning the vocabulary to describe different types of behavior helps to bring a lot of clarity to things. So um like for example, like with communication, okay, there's different styles, right? Um there's you've got a passive, there's passive aggressive, there's assertive, and then there's aggressive communication. So then kind of clarifying, okay, well, what style of communication am I using, or did my mother use, or did my partner use, or what have you, and getting clear, because it's all muddled together if we don't have the understanding that you know if we're putting everything in the same category, and we're getting tangled up with platitudes of like, oh, well, all parents love their children, and nobody's perfect, and forgive and forget, and that kind of stuff, and we're not being able to differentiate between like problematic behavior or like functional behavior and dysfunctional behavior, then it's like somebody takes a magnet to your internal compass and you just don't know how to move forward. It's next to impossible. So um in like what you were saying, Darlene, was that your name? Sorry, I lost the yes, Darlene. Like the parenting styles, learning, okay, gosh, there's different parenting styles. There's what is it? You have the um uh permissive parent, like the very passive parent. It's kind of, you do whatever. Kids, and the result depends on the child. Like um with all of these styles, you have so you have permissive parent. This is a parent that lets the child decide when they eat and when their bedtime is, and really just kind of, either they might lead with natural consequences, okay, yeah, you go to bed whenever you want to go to bed. But if you no, but you can't be late for school, kind of a thing. Or the permissive parent might not believe in discipline ever. And when I say discipline, I mean, like a punishment of any kind, like grounding or taking away privileges or what have you. Then you have the uh, what is the word I'm looking for? Author, is it the kind of like the dictator type parent? Like the dictator who demands complete compliance. You fall in line. It's all about discipline, very much a disciplinarian. It's their way or no way. It's there is no real connection. It's like they run the show. There's no negotiation. There's no regard for really other members of the family or how other people feel about things. Like they make all the decisions, they set the rules, they decide everything, kind of a parent. And then you have the more kind of middle ground parent who's, what is the word I'm looking for? Oh, authoritative is more of the disciplinarian, and the authoritative. So the authoritative is more of kind of that middle ground of, uh, I see you as a person. Like, I'm not a dictator. I'm going to have some rules. I'm going to enforce them reasonably. Uh, you know, I want to know I see you as an individual. I want to know like your thoughts and your feelings. And I'm not trying to make you into my friend. You're my child, but like, I want to see who you are, like what works best for you as a child and what works best for me as a parent. And let's kind of carve this path. Those types of parenting styles are, but like figuring out, uh, figuring that out, seeing the different styles can help be like, oh, that's why. But yeah, that's how I grew up. Okay, looks like, okay, Kat, it looks like Kat had a question. Okay, let me scroll up. Oh, oh no. Hold on. Let me scroll up. I'm sorry, you guys. Um, in the chat, if I don't get to your question, it's very difficult for me to think and talk and read the chat at the same time. So I tend to stop the chat. I just scroll up so it stops the chat because it's distracting to see it continue to scroll. And then I try to kind of give a broad brush answer to a question because it tends to cover other questions that people also ask. So I'm uh, definitely not like intentionally ignoring anybody or um, don't mean anything negative by it at all. Half the time I don't see the questions because I do stop the chat and the chat just keeps going and going. So it's difficult for me to see every one of them. So Kat, I don't even know if you're still here and I apologize for not seeing your question. That the moderators do try to get my attention. It's just one of the challenges of the chat. So please, that there's nothing personal intended by that on my end. But so anyways, Kat says, my support worker is overstepping boundaries and neglecting her duty of care. How do I address this? And I'm not even sure if Kat is still here. Jack had some good advice. I would agree. He says, contact the nursing agency or the healthcare agency that employs your support worker. I would also want to know, is this is this new? Has she normally been responsive, or is she recently just kind of letting things slide? Or and then Kat had mentioned, she says, oh, I employ her directly. I am severely depressed and she is not checking in with me. I feel it's secondary abuse more than anything. Have you, and again, I don't know if Kat, if you're still here or not, but I guess my question to that would be, have you made it clear? Okay, Kat's here. Good, good. I'm glad. Yay. Yay, you're still here. Okay. With have you made it clear that that you could really benefit, that you really need for her to check in with you and what you're needing? Like specifically, I'm really struggling with severe depression right now. It would really benefit me greatly if you could, whatever that might look like for you, text you, call you, um, uh, I don't know, twice a day, once a day, whatever support that you're needing at this time. Um, and is this type of support, is this something that she's been able, some people are better than others when it comes to emotional support like this. Like, I don't know if she's, when you say support worker, if it's more physical support that she normally gives you, or if it has been emotional support in the past. Um, so if she's, for whatever reason, if she's not able to do this, then I would start seeing, is there anybody else that you can reach out to during times like this, and also with the severe depression. Okay, Kat says, yeah, I'm clear on my boundaries and needs without being overbearing. She just seems to do with what suits her best. How long has she been with you? So if that's the case, then um, it seems, if she just kind of does whatever she wants to do, then it's not like the not so supportive support worker, right? Like, it might be time to find somebody different. So, um, yeah, it might be. And, now yeah, it's challenging because of the coronavirus. She's been with you 5 months. Okay. It might be challenging because of the coronavirus and precautions with all of that. But I think there's probably, um, and again, I don't know the dynamic. I don't know if she lives with you, or if she just checks in with you over the phone, or, um, what kind of support she's giving you, or what kind of support you're needing. Um, yeah. So it could be, um, yeah, it's going to be finding somebody who's actually supportive of a way that you need support, and who can respect your boundary. I mean, that's what you're paying her for. So giving you the support that you need, that you're paying for, kind of a thing. And if that's not possible right now, if there is also, what I meant to say too, is if you're really struggling with severe depression, um, I would encourage you, if you haven't already spoken to your doctor about it. I think this is probably very common, especially now with everything that's going on in the world. So I don't know if you're on medication for depression, um, or if you've ever considered it, but it might be time to consider getting a medication review, uh, doing something different. So severe depression, some degree of depression, falls within the range of normal. If it's severe depression to where it's debilitating and it's going on for longer than 2 weeks, then that's outside the range of kind of the normal experience. And it's worth seeing if you can talk to a doctor or a psychiatrist about that. Thankfully, uh, there are so many appointments that can now be done through telehealth with that kind of thing. So it might even be faster to see your doctor or to see somebody than it was previously. And in the meantime, before, if you're open to getting those kinds of pieces of the puzzle figured out, I there's there's I would explore your resources. So there's lots of internet groups that are out there. There's internet groups. If depression is an ongoing issue in your life, then you could potentially benefit from, I don't know if you're on Facebook or different kind of groups like that, but there's groups for people that live with depression. Um, and that can be, people get it there, you know? So people talk about symptoms, they talk about they're having a hard time, and it can be, I mean, you'll have to use your own judgment of, if it's kind of pulling you down further, or if it's helping to just feel validated and to be around other people who understand. Um, so finding what kind of groups can help you during this time. If I know a lot of, I don't know if you're kind of what your spiritual beliefs are, but I know that there's a lot of spiritual places out there, um, churches, uh, you know, synagogues, what have you, that are supporting members. And even if you're not a member, calling them and just saying like, I'm really struggling, and um, you know, seeing if you can kind of get on like a call list. That's a great question. Grace asks, Dana, what would you say severe depression looks like versus less severe? I would say it's kind of the degree and well, yeah, it's the degree of the symptoms and how long they're lasting. So if it's sleeping too much, or not sleeping enough, like changes in sleeping, changes in eating, loss of motivation, loss of interest in things you used to enjoy, kind of that feeling of apathy. Depression isn't just sadness. A lot of people think, oh, it's, you might be tearful all the time, but it might be a lack of emotion, like you're just numb, you're just kind of unruffled by anything and everything, you just don't care. uh, with more severe depression, it's that lack of, you just don't care, like you're not interested in doing much of anything. You don't care that you're gaining weight or losing weight. You don't care if you shower. You don't care how you look. You don't care if your clothes are clean. You don't care if your environment is clean or dirty. You don't there might be thoughts of self-harm, um, or just wanting to go to sleep and never wake up, like those kinds of things. That's all on the more severe side of depression. Uh, you know, a certain degree of depression falls within that range of the normal human experience, especially during times like these. But if you, I mean, and it sounds like Kat knows that she's in a bad place. She's like, I need help. I need somebody to check in on me. I need, like, I'm just not in a good place. Like this is my thoughts or my behaviors concerning to me. It's, um, you know, I, it sounds like she knows herself well enough to know like she's not in a good place. And people, um, that's wonderful that she has that level of insights. A lot of people don't. They just, because it can just be like a slow descent into quicksand. So everybody experiences depression a little bit differently. When the world is in a state of chaos like it is, some degree of kind of depression and overwhelm and sadness and fear and anxiety, all of that can be normal. But if it's debilitating, if it's lasting weeks on end, if you feel that it's growing, that's concerning. And this is going to be a real thing that people are going to be struggling with when they're not getting vitamin D, they're not going outside, they're not getting sunshine, they're not potentially getting regular exercise, or um, you know taking care of themselves like they normally would. um, it can be a slippery slope. And that's a very good point. I agree. Darlene said, I once had a nurse tell me that as a depressed person begins to heal, their risk of suicide increases because they're going from that emotional death or that numbness to beginning to feel again. Yeah. And that can be a challenge too. Absolutely. So I would just encourage you guys, to be checking in with yourself and to be figuring out, okay, what every day, the world changes every single day. And we're going through a really rough time now. As a people, we will get through this. We really will get through this. Thank goodness there are people that are scientists and we have humanitarians and there's lots of thank goodness, really smart people that are on top of this, that are working around the clock. And, they're on it. They really are on it. So this too shall pass. But right now we just need to figure out, okay, how can you take care of yourself during this time, day to day, checking in with yourself. What do you need today to stay safe and sane? And it might even be an hour at a time. What do you need now? And it might help too um, if you're having these moments where because depression can kind of be like a fog. It lifts and it settles, and it lifts and it settles. When it's kind of lifting a little bit, to make a list of things that you think might help. Like, what are some options? What are some groups that you could join, or who are some people that you could call, or um, you know, what things could you do to kind of kickstart this process of taking care of yourself and and getting the help that you're needing during this time. So, and Susanna was saying, I'm disabled and my spouse refuses to help me with life activities and she's becoming aggressive, which puts me in danger. Susanna, I would encourage you to call. You could call a local, I don't know if you have somebody that you work with, um, like a social worker or somebody like, I don't know to what degree, um, your disability is, or what kind of resources, that you're currently able to utilize. But I, if you have a social worker or some person that's part of like the team for you, then you could potentially reach out to them. If you're not comfortable with that, because they are mandated reporters, then you could consider calling a local domestic violence shelter and talking to them anonymously and saying, this is what's going on. Here are your concerns, kind of, do they have some options? And just kind of sometimes just talking it out with somebody and figuring out some options can really help. But I would encourage you to call somebody that can help, because if she's becoming aggressive, if you feeling like you're in danger, these kinds of things, there are alternatives out there. And so hopefully that you'll be able to come up with one. So Kat, I just see that you lost your internet, but now you're back. I think you should be able to come back after this video. It'll take a while for it to like process and then actually be live, or not live. What do you call it? Being able to replay it on YouTube. So, but I'm pretty sure that you should be able to see the chat again, and kind of pick up with where the internet cut off and everything. So a lot of people were commenting in the chat, that's great, good for you for knowing that you need help and reaching out. And again, I just want to reiterate, seeing if you can, figuring out kind of what resources do you have and who could you call, and if you could potentially join a group. But I think it's wonderful that you have that insight, that that you're struggling right now, and that you need help. So, and if things do get really bad for everybody involved, please know, you can look up the local, suicide hotline in your area. Even if you're not necessarily like at that point, it can be a good resource to call and and reach out and just say, I am severely depressed and I just don't know who else to call. you can do that. So a lot of these places, they'll do phone, or they do text, or they do a combination of both. So that is a resource. Okay. Okay, so with all of that said, we are over on time. I apologize, guys, but let's do a quick guided meditation, and then we will call it a night, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay. Oh my gosh, did you just hear my back? Oh, yikes. That's not a good sound. So take some time and find a comfortable spot, whether you are sitting down or laying down, whatever is comfortable for you. Just allowing yourself to breathe. Being fully present in this moment. Releasing worry that you have about the future, or any stress or anxiety about the past. With each breath in, becoming more grounded in this present moment. Realizing that there are lots of things that are good and right with this present moment, and that there are so many things that are good and right about you. And continuing to breathe. And with each breath in, allowing that breath to travel deep down into the bases of your lungs. Feeling your chest rise and fall easily and effortlessly with each passing breath. And on your next exhale, let's practice a different type of exhale. And this is called pressurized breathing. And so basically, when you breathe out, envision yourself fogging up a mirror. So it sounds and looks something like, it's like the breath is coming from the back of your throat. And when we do this pressurized breathing, we slow it down, exhale over 3 to 5 seconds, allowing your lungs to completely empty. That pressurized breathing is a way to get your body to connect with your parasympathetic nervous system. So your sympathetic nervous system is what kicks off that fight or flight. It sympathizes with you. It wants to help you get away from danger. That parasympathetic part of the nervous system is the rest and digest. So it gets us out of that fight or flight, and it helps us to relax and normalize. And so breathing this way, it helps to control, it helps to reconnect or wake up that parasympathetic system. So it can really help when you're feeling anxious, because part of that fight or flight is that shallow breathing. So allowing yourself to breathe deeply and exhale deeply using that pressured breathing. Again, feeling your chest rise and fall easily and effortlessly with each breath. And becoming fully aware using your various senses of this moment. Noticing the temperature in the room, if it's more on the warm side or the cool side. Noticing the feel of the fabric around you, if it's soft or kind of rough, if it's thin or if it's fluffy, if it's warm or if it's kind of cool against your skin. Noticing what you hear. If you can hear the sound of my voice, or perhaps the sound of the fan of my laptop, or perhaps the sound of your pets or other people in the house, or sounds from outside, or noticing the quiet, noticing what you don't hear. And bringing your attention inside your body. Noticing your heart beating. And what a wonderful job it does. So many just amazing things that our body does without us having to think about it or plan for it or anything. What a gift that our heart knows what to do and our lungs know what to do and our cells know what to do. And now bringing your attention down into your feet or your legs. Or perhaps even into your back. Feeling the surface underneath you. If you're lying down or you're sitting up. Knowing that you are supported physically and emotionally, that you are supported, that you are not alone in whatever you are going through. And thankfully, with the internet, we all have so many different ways of connecting to each other and to other groups. And um, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Acknowledging how far you've come. And that there are so many things that are good and right with you. You're interested in personal growth. That's huge, huge. You're interested in improving your life. You're courageous for doing so. You're brave. You're open to experience this new chapter in your life. You're open to doing the self-work required. That's incredibly profound. Many people have taken the step and reaching out and asking for help or support. That is very courageous and very brave and shows a tremendous amount of insight. There are so many things that are good and right with you guys. You're creative. You're capable. So many things. So please just take some time. Let's take the next 3 breaths to just sit in that and realize, yeah, you know what? You're doing a lot of things right. And there's a lot about you that's good and lovable and valuable, and that you have value, you have worth, and you matter. When you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. So thank you guys so much for being here. And I hope that this next week that you really are able to get in tune with what you're needing for self-care, and that you guys are really tripling up on your self-care, being extra good to yourself during this time. And yeah, so just lots of love to you guys. As always, you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and just lots of light and love to you. Okay. Good night.